The oil hit her before she could move. It was not an accident. Lily knew that the moment she felt the heat tear across her shoulder and neck, the moment she heard Rosamond laugh, a sound so quickly swallowed it might have been a cough, except that Lily had grown up in the same house as Rosamond, and she knew every sound that woman made, every performance, every carefully arranged expression. She did not scream. She pressed her lips together and stood still, and breathed through her nose, slow and even, the way her mother had once taught her to breathe when things hurt. Not because her mother had expected her to be burned at a formal court selection, but because pain had many shapes, and her mother had been a practical woman. 3 days earlier, Lily had been in the kitchen of the house that no longer belonged to her. It had once been her father's house. Before that, her grandfather's. The walls still held the faint smell of the cedar oil her father used to rub into the wood panels every autumn. And if Lily pressed her palm flat against the wall near the eastern window on a warm afternoon, she could almost feel something of him still in it. Almost. She had stopped doing that. It made the days harder. Her father, Edmund Crane, had died 4 winters ago. He had died quietly, in his sleep, which people said was a blessing, and which Lily suspected was just something people said, because they did not know what else to offer. She had been 17. She had held his hand before they buried him, and she had not cried until she was back in her small room at the end of the hall, and then she had cried for a very long time, in a way that felt like the last of something leaving her body. The house had passed, by her father's will, to his widow, her stepmother, Clara Voss. Clara Voss had come into Edmund Crane's life 2 years before he died, arriving with 2 daughters, a stack of luggage, and the particular kind of confidence that belongs to women who have survived one husband already and know exactly how to move through the world with a second. She had not been unkind to Lily at first. She had been strategic. She had smiled and asked questions and touched Lily's hair with something that resembled affection. It was only after Edmund was gone that the shape of things became clear. The house passed to Clara. The money passed to Clara. The decisions passed to Clara. Lily passed into a category that had no clean name. She was not a servant. She ate at the table when Clara permitted it. She slept in a real room, small but real, at the back of the house where the hall met the garden. She wore decent clothes, though never the ones Clara bought for Rosamond and Harriet. She attended family occasions and social events when her presence was useful, as decoration, as a carrier of things, as proof that the household ran smoothly, and that Clara was a generous woman. She was useful in the way a good piece of furniture is useful. Present, functional, occasionally moved from one room to another. Rosamond was the elder stepsister, 23 now, with her mother's confidence and her father's money, which her mother had apparently gotten most of in a settlement before the man died. Rosamond wore that money in her posture, in the way she tilted her head when she looked at Lily, in the small and careful cruelties she had been perfecting since Lily was 17 and suddenly alone. Harriet was younger, 21, and softer in most ways. But softness is not the same as kindness, and Harriet had understood early in life that the easiest way to stay comfortable was to agree with her sister. She had never defended Lily. She had never needed to, in her own mind, because she had never thought of herself as attacking Lily either. She simply looked away. Lily had learned that looking away was sometimes worse than the cruelty itself. 3 days before the selection, Lily had been sitting near the kitchen hearth, mending a dress of Rosamond's that had caught on a latch and torn along the hem. The firelight was the only warm thing in the room. Her fingers moved steadily, needle in and out, the thread pulling the fabric back to something clean. The jade hairpin was in her left pocket. She kept it there on days when she needed something to hold on to. It was small, the length of her middle finger, carved from pale green stone with a tiny crane worked into one end. The crane was the Crane family mark, which her father had chosen for its meaning. Long life, fidelity, the capacity to endure. She had found it in her mother's belongings after Clara had gone through them, which Clara had done with a thoroughness that still made Lily's chest tighten when she thought about it. Most of her mother's things were gone. The hairpin had been hidden in the lining of a winter coat that Clara had apparently not found worth keeping. Lily had sewn the coat's lining closed around it. Then she had taken the pin out and wrapped it in a piece of cloth and kept it under the loose floorboard beneath her bed for 2 years. Then she had started keeping it in her pocket, not wearing it, just carrying it. There was a difference she could not fully explain. Above her, through the ceiling, She could hear Rosamond's footsteps pacing the length of the upstairs sitting room. Back and forth, back and forth. The steps had a rhythm that Lily recognized as excitement barely contained. The edict had arrived that morning. Duke William Ashford was selecting a bride. The announcement had come through official channels, a formal letter delivered to every house of standing in the city, bearing the Duke's seal in dark red wax, the paper itself thicker and finer than anything Lily had touched in years. Clara had read it 3 times at the breakfast table, while her daughters watched her face with the particular attention of people waiting to understand what emotion they should be performing. Clara's expression had settled, eventually, into something that looked like calculation wearing the mask of delight. William Ashford was, by any measure that mattered to Clara Voss, the most significant unmarried man in the province. He was 31. He had held the title since his father's death 6 years ago, and had managed it well. The city was cleaner under his governance, the courts fairer, the trade routes better maintained. People who worked for him said he was serious but not cold, demanding but not cruel. People who hoped to marry their daughters to him said rather less, because they were too busy hoping. He had no scandal attached to his name. This was either a sign of great character or great privacy, and Clara suspected both. The selection was to be held in 4 days. All unmarried daughters of standing were required to attend and present themselves formally in the outer courtyard of the Ashford estate. The Duke would make his choice within the week. Clara had immediately begun planning which gowns Rosamond and Harriet would wear. She had told Lily, with a smile that did not reach her eyes, that Lily would attend as a household companion, to carry the parasol, to stand respectfully behind. Lily had said yes. What else was there to say? She had no money of her own, no standing that Clara had not quietly dismantled over 4 years, no allies in the city who could or would speak for her. Her father's friends had faded after his death with the slow inevitability of people who are loyal to a man but not to his legacy. 1 or 2 had looked at her with something like guilt when they passed her in the market. None of them had done anything about the guilt. She had said yes and gone back to the kitchen and picked up the needle. She pressed her fingers around the jade pin in her pocket. The crane in the stone was worn smooth, from her thumb working over it in moments like this one. She could feel the shape of it perfectly even without looking. The long neck, the folded wings, the single foot it stood on. Her mother had told her once that a crane could stand on one leg in a storm for hours without falling, not because it was strong, but because it knew exactly how to balance. Lily had thought about that many times in 4 years. The morning of the selection, Clara moved through the house before dawn. This was how Lily knew it mattered. On ordinary days, Clara rose at a civilized hour and descended with her hair already arranged, moving through the house, at the pace of a woman who owned everything in it. On days that mattered, she rose early, her footsteps quick and purposeful in the hall, her voice carrying instructions to the household staff in the brisk, clipped tones of someone running a campaign. Lily heard her through the thin wall of her room. She had already been awake. She rose, washed her face in the basin of water she kept by the window. She had learned to draw her own water in the mornings, because depending on anyone in this house for small comforts was a way of giving them small power, and dressed in the plain blue dress that Clara had set aside for her the week before. It was clean and well-made and entirely ordinary. The kind of thing you wore when your job was to be invisible. She put the jade pin in her pocket. She did not eat breakfast. The kitchen was full of activity, the cook managing 3 separate requests at once, Harriet changing her mind about her earrings for the 4th time. Lily moved through it all without being fully present in any of it, the way she had learned to move through the house in general, smoothly, without edges. The carriage ride to the Ashford estate took 40 minutes. Rosamond spoke about the Duke the entire time, in the particular voice she used when she was performing confidence, because the real thing was slightly beyond her reach. She talked about his estate, his reputation, his apparent preference for women with musical accomplishment. She talked about the dress she was wearing, and what it communicated, and how she intended to position herself in the courtyard lineup. She talked the way people talk when they are very nervous, and have decided that talking will help. Harriet agreed with everything she said. Lily sat with her hands in her lap and watched the city move past the carriage window. The streets were full. Half the city seemed to have come out to watch the carriages of eligible households make their way toward the Ashford estate. People lined the road in clusters, working people, merchants, children who had climbed walls for a better view. Some of them waved, some of them just watched with the steady curiosity of people, for whom other people's significant days were a kind of entertainment. A small girl sitting on a gatepost waved directly at Lily as the carriage passed. Lily raised her hand and waved back. Rosamond did not notice. Clara was looking at the estate gates ahead, calculating. The Ashford estate sat on the north side of the city, its outer walls old stone that had stood for 200 years. The gates were open, the entrance decorated with ceremonial lanterns strung between the gateposts, unlit in the morning light, but promising something warmer for the evening hours. Carriages were lining up along the approach road in both directions, household after household disgorging their eligible daughters and their attending companions, the whole scene carrying the organized energy of something that was both formal and deeply human. Clara stepped out of the carriage first, as she always did. Then Rosamond, who had arranged her skirts 3 times on the ride and looked exactly the way she had intended to look. Then Harriet, her expression bright and slightly anxious. Then Lily, last, carrying the parasol. She stepped down onto the gravel and looked up. The estate was larger than she had imagined. The outer courtyard was wide and paved in pale stone, the household staff positioned along its edges with the practiced stillness of people trained never to draw attention to themselves. At the far end, a raised platform had been prepared, draped in the Ashford colors, deep blue and silver, and to one side of it, an attendant was managing the arrangement of the formal lineup. Several dozen young women were already gathered. Some Lily recognized, most she did not. All of them had the same look about them, carefully assembled, carefully composed, and underneath the composition, various degrees of hope or anxiety or calculation, depending on the woman. Clara guided her daughters toward the lineup, with the focused purpose of a general moving pieces across a board. Lily followed, 3 paces behind. She stood where she was directed to stand, slightly to the left and behind Rosamond, the parasol angled to provide shade for Rosamond's complexion in the growing morning sun. She adjusted her grip on the handle. She looked at the courtyard around her. Near the entrance, household servants were carrying items for the ceremonial preparation of the evening lanterns, large clay pots that held oil, which would be used to fill and light the lanterns along the estate walls once the selection moved into its evening phase. Several of the pots had been heated already, for some reason she could not determine from where she stood, and the smell of warm oil drifted faintly across the courtyard. She noticed Rosamond exchange a look with Harriet, a very small look, the kind that happened in the space between one breath and the next. Lily noticed it the way she had learned to notice things in 4 years of living in a house where looking away meant missing something that would matter later. She noticed it, and she did not know yet what it meant. But something behind her ribs went very quiet. The lineup was still settling into order. The attendant at the platform was moving down the row with a list, checking names against household records, arranging women by a protocol that had apparently been set in advance. The morning sun was fully up now, warm and white, falling across the pale paving stones with the clean light of early autumn. The Duke had not yet appeared. The courtyard buzzed with low conversation, the kind that stops when something important begins. Women adjusted their posture. Mothers in the attending row checked their daughters' appearances one final time with the swift, silent efficiency of people who have done this before in some form or another, who know that the last moment before a thing begins is also the last moment to correct anything. Clara straightened Rosamond's collar. Harriet fidgeted with her bracelet. Lily stood still. She could feel the jade pin in her pocket. She was not touching it, but she could feel it there, the way you feel a thing that has become part of the daily shape of your hands. The attendant was 2 places away from them now, moving down the list. Rosamond's posture changed almost imperceptibly, a very slight inward gathering, a breath held just a fraction longer than normal. In someone else it might have been anticipation. In Rosamond, Lily knew, it was always something more deliberate. 1 place away. The attendant paused. And then, across the courtyard, from somewhere near the entry path, a sound she knew without knowing why she recognized it, the particular creak of a large cartwheel on uneven paving stone, something shifting, the sound of a man's surprised shout. Later, she would not be able to fully reconstruct the sequence. She would try, in the quiet of many nights after, to put the pieces in order. The shout, the crash of a clay pot tilting from a cart, The sound of the oil, which was not quite a sound but a sensation. The way a wave of heat arrives a moment before the thing producing it. It found her left shoulder and the side of her neck. The oil was not boiling at the precise temperature it had been when it left the kitchen, but it was still very hot. Hot enough to make the breath leave her body. Hot enough to make the world narrow down to a single bright, searing point. She did not scream. She pressed her lips together and stood still and breathed through her nose, slow and even. Around her, sound rushed back in, the gasp of the women nearby, the flurry of voices, a servant's apology, the organized chaos of a formal event absorbing an unexpected disruption. Someone was asking if she was all right, someone else was saying it was an accident. A third voice was already talking about something else entirely. She heard Rosamond, close behind her. Not laughing now. A sound swallowed. Something controlled. Something that had been waiting to happen, and had now happened. And the waiting was over. Lily turned her head very slowly. Her neck protested. She turned it anyway. She looked at Rosamond's face. Rosamond looked back at her with an expression that was perfect. Composed and concerned and regretful. Every element of it precisely in place, the way a table is set precisely for guests who are being watched. It was the perfection of the expression that told Lily everything. She turned back to face the platform. She breathed. The jade pin in her pocket was still there. She could feel the small weight of it. She had not dropped the parasol. She was still holding it, at the correct angle, in the hand that had not been burned. She did not know yet that, at that exact moment, a man at the far end of the courtyard had stopped watching the lineup and was watching her instead. Watching the particular, terrible stillness of a woman who had just been hurt badly and had responded by becoming more composed, not less, as though pain were something she had learned a long time ago to take indoors. She did not know that he had noticed. She would find out. She did not move. That was the first thing Duke William Ashford noticed about her, that while every other woman in the courtyard had flinched, stepped back, reached for someone, or simply turned to look at the source of the commotion, the woman holding the parasol had not moved at all. She had gone completely still, not frozen, still. The way a person goes still when they are in pain, and they know from practice that the pain will be worse if they move. He had seen that kind of stillness before. He had seen it on battlefields, briefly, when he was young and his father had taken him along on a formal inspection of the Northern Territories. A soldier who had been struck by something and stood with it, his face arranged carefully, his body refusing to acknowledge what was happening, because acknowledgement would mean stopping, and stopping was not permitted. That soldier had been 20 years old, and had looked at William with eyes that were trying very hard to be somewhere else. The woman in the courtyard had the same eyes. She was looking at the platform, not at the people around her, not at the woman who had been closest to her when the oil fell, not at the commotion that everyone else was managing. She was looking at the platform as if it were the only fixed point in the world, and she needed a fixed point. William was 31 years old, and had been managing people and situations, and the particular theater of formal court events, since he was 25. He knew what an accident looked like. He knew the specific shape of an event that had been engineered to look like an accident, and it had a different shape entirely. It had the shape of a thing that was too precisely aimed, too cleanly arranged, that arrived with a certainty that true accidents do not carry. He had watched the taller stepsister. He did not yet know her name. He would learn it within the hour, in the 30 seconds before the pot tilted. He had seen a look pass between her and the younger one. He had seen her take one small, deliberate step to the left. The look and the step were ordinary enough on their own. Together, given what followed 3 seconds later, they were not ordinary at all. He handed his cup to his steward without looking, and walked across the courtyard. Behind him, his personal secretary let out a very quiet sound that was not quite a word. The secretary had been with William for 6 years, and had learned that sounds, unlike words, could not be held against you as having said anything specific. It was the sound of a man registering that an unusual thing was happening, and calculating, very quickly, what the social implications were going to be. William walked at his usual pace, which was not fast, and was not slow but covered ground efficiently, and left no room for hesitation. He walked past the lineup of candidates, which rearranged itself around him instinctively, every young woman in it becoming slightly more composed as he passed. like flowers tracking the sun. He did not look at any of them. He looked at the woman at the end of the line, standing 3 paces behind where 2 women were now whispering to each other in voices that were carefully modulated to sound concerned. He reached her. Up close, she was younger than he had thought from across the courtyard, perhaps 21, with dark hair that had been arranged simply and efficiently, the kind of arrangement that speaks of practicality rather than a lack of care. Her dress was plain and well made, and she was wearing it like a woman who is accustomed to wearing whatever she is given without complaint. Her left shoulder and the side of her neck were burned. Not severely. The oil had not been at full heat, and her dress had absorbed some of it. But it was clearly painful, and the skin at the edge of her collar was visibly red. She became aware of him with a very slight alteration of her posture, a recognition passing through her without showing on her face in any obvious way. She did not curtsy. He suspected she was not entirely sure she could at that particular moment. He unclasped his outer coat. It was a formal garment, deep blue wool with silver thread at the collar and cuffs, made for ceremony and warmth in equal measure. He placed it over her left shoulder with a care that did not call attention to itself. The cloth settled over the burned skin without pressing into it. She looked up at him. Her eyes were the kind of quiet gray that does not appear in paintings, that painters always replace with something more dramatic because they do not know what to do with the particular depth of it. She looked at him with an expression that was doing a great deal of controlled work. It was composed on the surface, but underneath the composure, he could see something that was not surprise, exactly, but was close to it. Not surprise that he had helped her. Surprise that anyone had noticed her at all. He held her gaze. Then he turned, still standing close enough to her that the movement had a definite quality to it, and he looked at the 2 women who had been standing 3 paces in front of her. Rosamund Voss met his gaze with a face that had just completed a very fast internal adjustment. She was beautiful in the way that some women are beautiful, when they have been carefully taught how to present that beauty, deliberately, like a weapon that has been polished before use. Her expression was solicitous and concerned and entirely controlled. He looked at her for 5 seconds. Then he said, in a voice that carried clearly across the portion of the courtyard that had gone quiet around them, 5 words. "Who does this young woman belong to?" He said it quietly and precisely, and it did not require raising his voice to carry the weight of what it meant. The silence that followed it was complete. Clara Voss, standing 2 paces behind Rosamund, had been in the process of calculating the social cost of the incident, and whether it could be turned to some advantage by very quick and public generosity toward Lily. The question stopped that calculation as cleanly as a door closing. "She is my stepdaughter," Clara said. The word came out with a slightly different weight than she had intended, because she had been caught between 2 calculations, and had resolved to the truth before she could arrange the truth into something more favorable. William nodded. He looked back at the woman beside him. "What is your name?" he asked her. She met his eyes. "Lily Crane," she said. Her voice was steady. That cost her something, he suspected, though he did not let his expression show that he noticed it. "Miss Crane," he said, "would you allow my physician to see to your shoulder?" She looked at him for a moment. It was the look of someone who is not used to being offered things and is checking, out of long habit, whether there is something hidden in the offer. Then she said, "Yes. Thank you." He turned and spoke briefly to his steward, who moved off immediately. Then he looked back at the lineup, at the assembled household, and the waiting attendants, and the entire formal machinery of the selection that had been going along exactly as planned 10 minutes ago. His secretary was at his shoulder, and William could feel the man's desire to say something practical and ordering about what came next. He said, "The presentation will continue as scheduled, after a brief interval." Then he said nothing further and simply waited. This was one of the things that made him effective and slightly unnerving to people who worked for him. He knew how to wait in a way that made other people fill the silence. He had learned that the person who speaks first, in an uncomfortable silence, is usually the person who is least comfortable. He was not uncomfortable. Clara Voss spoke first. She moved forward, her smile precisely arranged, her voice warm, with a warmth that was doing a great deal of structural work. "Your Grace is very kind," she said. "It was a dreadful accident. We are so grateful for your concern." He looked at her. "Of course," he said. He said it pleasantly. Clara Voss, who was an intelligent woman, heard something in the pleasantness that was not entirely pleasant. Her smile held. The physician arrived within 4 minutes, which spoke well of the Ashford household's organization. He was a compact, efficient man named Dr. Felton, who had served the estate for 12 years, and who managed to be both thorough and unobtrusive, the rarest of combinations. He led Lily to a sheltered bench near the estate's inner garden wall, far enough from the main courtyard for privacy. William did not follow. He returned to his position near the platform, and the presentation resumed. But he was aware, for the rest of the morning, of exactly where Lily Crane was. He was aware when the physician finished his work. He was aware when Lily returned to the edge of the courtyard, still wearing his coat over her shoulder, and stood in the position she had been standing in before, 3 paces behind Rosamond, the parasol held correctly, as if she were fulfilling a task she had been given, and nothing in the world was going to stop her from fulfilling it. He was aware of Rosamond watching her from the corner of her eye. He was aware of Clara watching him watch. The morning proceeded. Women were presented. Families gave their formal introductions. His attendants made notes. The ceremony was old and had its own weight, its own rhythm, and he moved through it with the respect he owed to its formality, while the part of his mind that never quite stopped working was doing something else entirely. He knew the name Crane. He had known it for 2 years, specifically, though the knowing had been in the background of things. A piece of information held in a file in his study, a connection made in a quiet moment, set aside to be dealt with when the time arrived. He had not expected it to arrive like this. He had not expected to meet a Crane daughter at a selection ceremony, standing behind 2 stepsisters, wearing a dress that told him everything about the last 4 years, without her saying a word about them. His father had known Edmund Crane. Not well, they had not been close friends, but in the particular way that men of similar rank in a city know each other, by reputation first, by occasional meetings second, by the long lateral awareness of people who occupy the same tier of a social structure and are therefore always, in some sense, in each other's peripheral vision. Edmund Crane had been, by every account William had ever heard, a good man, serious, principled, a collector of books and a fair magistrate, and a man who had loved his first wife with a thoroughness that the city had noticed and quietly admired, because it was not as common as it should have been. He had also made, in the last years of his life, a decision that William's father had not agreed with. A business arrangement with a trading partner that had turned out badly, not through any dishonesty on Edmund's part, but through bad luck and worse timing, and the arrangement had cost Edmund considerably. It had also cost William's father a smaller but not insignificant sum, and the matter had been resolved eventually, but it had left behind the faint residue that unpleasant financial matters always leave behind, a kind of atmospheric discomfort that had never quite cleared before Edmund died and made clearing it impossible. William had looked into it afterward, quietly, without announcing himself, the way he handled most things he needed to understand clearly. What he had found had changed the shape of the matter considerably. Edmund Crane had not made a bad decision. He had made a decision that had been made bad for him, systematically, by a third party who had been invested in making it look like Edmund's fault. By the time William understood this fully, Edmund was 4 years dead, and his house was in Clara Voss's name. He had set the information aside. He had not, in the 2 years since, known what to do with it. The law was clear about property that had passed through a legitimate will, and Clara Voss, whatever her character, had not broken any law he could prove. Suspicion was not evidence. Knowledge was not proof. He had kept the information in the file in his study, and he had turned it over periodically in his mind, the way you turn a stone in a stream, watching the current move around it. The presentation ended at midday. Families were guided toward the refreshment hall for the midday interval. William accepted the necessary conversations, the careful approaches of fathers and mothers and occasionally siblings, all of whom wanted 10 minutes of his time, and most of whom wanted it for reasons he fully understood and did not hold against them. He moved through the hall with the practiced ease of a man who has been doing this for 6 years. He did not see Lily Crane in the hall. After 15 minutes, he made a quiet inquiry of his steward. The steward returned within 2 minutes. "She is in the East Garden." She was not admitted to the hall. He paused for a moment with a cup of wine in his hand, looking at nothing in particular. By whose instruction? The steward looked slightly uncomfortable in the way of a man delivering information that he would rather not be delivering. The elder Miss Voss informed her that companions wait outside during the interval. William set the cup down. He made his way to the east garden by the interior route, which took him through the library corridor and the connecting passage that opened onto the eastern garden wall. It was a quiet path that most guests did not know about, which was exactly why he used it on the occasions when he needed to reach somewhere without generating a procession. The east garden was a narrow rectangle of gravel and old rose bushes, most of them past their summer growth and settling into the dusty preparation for autumn. A stone bench ran along the south wall under the overhang where the sun did not reach. Lily Crane was sitting on it. She was not doing anything. She was not reading, not looking at anything specific, not performing composure for anyone. She was sitting with her hands in her lap and her eyes on the far wall, and she had the quality of someone who has been alone so often that they have learned to actually be alone rather than simply appearing to be. His coat was still on her shoulder. He sat down on the bench. She turned her head. Her expression registered him with a kind of careful neutrality that was, he thought, her default mode, not coldness, not hostility, but the face of someone who has learned that reactions have costs and has therefore reduced them to the minimum necessary. "Are you in pain?" he asked. "It's manageable," she said. "That is not what I asked." She looked at him for a moment. "Yes," she said. He nodded. He sat for a moment without speaking. The garden was quiet. Beyond the walls, the sounds of the interval drifted in. Voices, footsteps on gravel, the organized hum of the household managing 50 guests at once. "You should not be sitting out here," he said. "I was told to." "I know." He paused. "The instruction has been revised." She looked at him again, that same checking look. "Is there something behind this offer? Something I am going to be required to pay for later?" He held the gaze steadily. "I don't need charity," she said, quietly, without heat. "I know," he said again. "I'm asking you to come inside, because the food is better than what you'll find in the East Garden, and because you are a guest of the Crane family, which means you are a guest of this estate, and guests eat in the hall." A small silence. "The Crane family," she said. Something passed across her face that was very quick and very complex. "That is generous framing." "It is accurate framing," he said. She looked at him for a moment longer. Then she stood, carefully, keeping the coat on her shoulder. "All right," she said. They walked back through the library corridor together. He walked next to her rather than ahead of her, because ahead of her would have been a statement about who was leading this particular movement through the house, and he had no interest in making that statement. Side by side was simply practical. She did not speak during the walk. Neither did he. But when they entered the hall together, the room's social machinery did something that he had known it would do, and that he had decided he did not mind. It noticed. Every head in the room registered them at once, with the particular rapid social calculation of people who understand that a significant man entering a room next to someone they have not previously registered as significant is an event that requires immediate recalibration. Clara Voss's face, across the room, went through 3 expressions in 2 seconds. The third one settled into the smile, but it took a moment longer than her smiles usually did. Rosamond, beside her, was very still. William guided Lily to a seat near the center of the hall, where the food was, and where, not incidentally, she was visible to the room in a way that the East Garden bench was not. He stayed long enough to ensure she was properly seated, and that the serving staff had noticed and attended to her. Then he excused himself, with a slight inclination of his head. She looked up at him from the seat. "Thank you," she said, the same 2 words as before, but with something slightly different in them. Not warmer, exactly, but less guarded, as if she had let 1 degree of the guard down, just 1, and was not yet sure whether that was safe. He thought, "You have been in that house with those women for 4 years, and you are still here, still upright, still carrying the hairpin in your pocket, instead of leaving it behind, and you do not know yet that I know who you are, and what was done to your father." He said, "You are welcome, Miss Crane." Then he went back to the hall's center and the necessary business of the afternoon. But the file in his study was no longer something he could set aside. Clara Voss did not sleep that night. She lay in the wide, carefully furnished bed that had once belonged to Edmund Crane, and stared at the ceiling, and went over the afternoon the way a merchant goes over accounts, methodically, column by column, looking for the exact location of the problem. The problem was Lily. It was always, eventually, Lily. Clara had managed the girl for 4 years with what she privately considered a high degree of skill. She had not been cruel in any obvious way. She had not been exclusionary in any way that could be easily named or pointed to. She had simply arranged the daily architecture of the house so that Lily was present without being prominent, useful without being valued, visible without being seen. It was a delicate construction, and Clara was proud of it, though she would have denied the pride if pressed. The problem with delicate constructions is that they do not survive large, blunt objects, and Duke William Ashford, walking across a formal courtyard to place his coat on the shoulders of a woman everyone else in the room was carefully not looking at, was about as large and blunt as objects came. She turned over in the bed. She thought about the look he had given Rosamond. She had seen the look. She had understood it. That was the worst part. She was an intelligent woman, and she had understood immediately and completely what the look meant, which was that he had seen something, and that what he had seen was not the accident she and Rosamond had arranged but the arrangement itself. She had seen understanding in his face, the way you see a lamp in a window from a long distance away, small but unmistakable. She should not have let Rosamond talk her into it. She should not have, but she had. And the reason she had was the same reason she had done most things in the last 4 years. Lily was a problem that would not resolve itself. Lily, with her father's name and her mother's quiet dignity, and the particular kind of presence she had, that was not beauty in any competitive sense, but was something equally irritating to Clara, something that people noticed without knowing they were noticing it. Lily, who had never complained, never fought, never done anything dramatic, and whose very lack of drama was itself a kind of indictment. At the bride selection, properly seen, Lily would be seen, and being seen was the one thing Clara needed to prevent. She had been so certain they could prevent it. She sat up in the bed. The room was dark except for the thin line of moonlight at the edge of the curtain. She needed to think about what to do next, not about what had already happened. That was done, and reprocessing it further was a waste of cognitive effort. She needed to think about the morning, about the remaining days of the selection, about what William Ashford's behavior today meant for the sequence of events she had planned. She thought for a long time. By the time the light at the curtain edge began to change from moon-white to the early gray of pre-dawn, she had arrived at a plan. It was not the plan she wanted, but it was functional. She would go to Lily, in the morning, early. She would go with the particular softness she had used in the first 2 years, before she had decided the softness was no longer necessary. She would be concerned about Lily's injury. She would be warm and maternal and full of apology, and she would suggest, gently, carefully, that Lily might be more comfortable spending the remaining days of the selection at home, resting, recovering. It would be for her own good, Clara would say it that way. And Lily, who had spent 4 years accepting the arrangements Clara made for her, would accept this one too. That was the plan. She fell asleep just before dawn with the plan intact and woke 3 hours later to the sound of something that was not supposed to be happening. The sound was a carriage, coming, not going, stopping in front of the house. Clara was at the window before she was fully awake. The carriage was deep blue. The door bore, in silver, an insignia she recognized immediately. She had spent enough time thinking about it in the last 12 hours that she would have recognized it in the dark. It was the Ashford seal. 2 things arrived simultaneously at the door: a letter, formally sealed, addressed to Miss Lily Crane, and a physician, the same compact man from the day before, who had been sent with explicit instructions to check on the patient and report directly to the Duke on her condition. Clara stood in the entrance hall in her morning robe and watched a member of the Ashford household staff deliver a letter to her stepdaughter's room. She held herself very still. Rosamond appeared at the top of the stairs, still in her sleeping clothes, her hair loose, and looked down at the scene below. Her face was very blank, in the way that faces go blank when the brain is working at maximum speed and cannot spare anything for expression. "Mother," she said. Go back to your room, Clara said. Mother, what is... Rosamond. Flat, quiet. Rosamond went back to her room. Clara sent for Harriet instead. Harriet was younger and more pliable and less invested in her own particular narrative, which made her more useful in certain situations. She was also, and this was the thing that made her genuinely valuable right now, very good at finding things out quietly, because people consistently underestimated her and told her things they would not tell Rosamond or Clara. Clara explained what she needed. Harriet sat across from her at the breakfast table, with her hands wrapped around a cup of tea, her soft face attentive. She was not unintelligent. She simply moved through the world at a lower temperature than her sister. She listened to what Clara said, and then she said, in her mild way, "You want me to find out what the letter says?" "I want you to find out what Lily is planning," Clara said. "The letter will tell us that." Harriet looked at her tea. "And if she is planning to go back to the estate?" Clara looked at her. "She won't go alone." "She cannot go alone. It would not be appropriate. She will need a household member to accompany her. She will assume I will send her alone." Harriet was quiet for a moment. "I could offer to go with her," Harriet said slowly, "to the estate, as a companion." Clara felt a small, warm satisfaction, the kind she felt when a piece fell correctly into place. "That would be very kind of you," she said. Harriet looked at her tea again. Something moved across her face that Clara did not examine too closely. Harriet was useful precisely because she did not examine herself too closely either, or if she did, she had learned not to let the examination interfere with her actions. But upstairs, in the small room at the back of the house, something entirely different was happening. Lily was sitting on the edge of her bed, with the letter in her hands. She had read it twice. Then, she had set it down on the coverlet and pressed her palms flat on her knees and looked at the window. The letter was from William Ashford. It was written in his own hand rather than a secretary's, which she knew because the handwriting was slightly different from the formal lettering of the outer seal, more direct, less ornamented, the hand of someone who wrote for function rather than display. It was brief. It said that he hoped she was recovering, that his physician was available should she need further attention, that he was aware the incident of the previous day had not been accidental, and that he intended to address this when the selection concluded, but that she should know now, before the conclusion, that he was aware of it. It said that he was also aware of her father's name, and the name's connection to certain events 2 years ago that had been on his mind for some time. It said, finally, that if she was willing, he would like to speak with her privately before the selection process concluded, that she was under no obligation to attend, that his secretary would arrange whatever time and location she preferred. That was all. Lily read it a third time. She folded it carefully and put it under the loose floorboard with the cloth that had wrapped the jade pin. Then she sat on the edge of the bed again. Outside her window, the city was going about its morning with complete indifference to any of this. A cart went by. A woman was calling something to a neighbor across the street. A bird was doing something complicated on the gutter above her window. She pressed her right hand to the burned skin at her neck, very gently. Dr. Felton had been thorough the day before. He had cleaned the burn carefully and applied something that smelled of herbs and had, overnight, taken most of the sharpest pain out of it. It would heal. It would leave a small scar, probably, along the edge of her neck where the oil had reached past her collar. She did not spend very long thinking about the scar. She was thinking about the letter. He knew it was not an accident. She had known that he knew, from the moment he walked across the courtyard, because people do not walk across formal courtyards toward injured household companions on a sudden whim. They do it because they have seen something. She had not known, until the letter, how much he had seen. He knew her father's name. She turned this over in her mind, the way you turn a piece of glass in sunlight, watching it throw different colors depending on the angle. He had said the name was connected to events 2 years ago that had been on his mind. 2 years ago, William Ashford had become Duke. 2 years ago, she was doing the arithmetic quickly and it made her chest tight. 2 years ago was also when the trading arrangement that had destroyed part of her father's estate had been reviewed in the court records by a new administrative process. She had not been included in that review. She had been 17 and recently bereaved, and Clara had handled all the legal matters with the speed and thoroughness of a woman, who understood that the faster a thing is settled, the less time there is to question it. She did not know what had been in those records. She had tried to find out, once, 18 months ago. She had asked a clerk in the records office very politely whether she could see certain documents relating to her late father's estate. The clerk had told her, very politely, that the records were in the custody of the current household head and could only be accessed with that person's authorization. Clara's authorization. She had walked home from the records office that day and sat down at the kitchen table and thought about being very angry, and then decided against it, because anger, without a path forward, is just energy spent badly. She had done her mending instead, and kept the feeling behind her ribs where it lived, and got very good at not looking at it. The letter said he wanted to speak with her. She was examining the letter the way she examined every offer made to her in the last 4 years, turning it, checking it, looking for the weight hidden inside it that would declare itself later at the worst possible moment. She was aware that this was a habit that had protected her, and was also, perhaps, a habit that had cost her things she could not see clearly, because she had gotten so good at not expecting them. She was also aware, and she could not stop being aware of it, that he had put his coat on her shoulder in front of everyone in that courtyard. He had not done it quietly. He had not sent a servant. He had crossed the yard himself, and he had placed his coat on her himself, and he had said 5 words that had moved through that crowd like a stone through still water, and he had to have known that they would. A man who does not know that what he is doing will be observed does not do it at a formal court event with 50 households watching. He had done it on purpose. She did not know yet what the purpose was. She had guesses. She had become very good at guessing the purposes behind things, even if she was sometimes wrong, because in the house she had lived in for 4 years, guessing wrong had consequences. But he had noticed she was not in the hall during the interval. He had found her in the garden. He had sat next to her on the bench, not opposite her, not at a distance, next to her, and he had asked her directly if she was in pain, and when she had deflected, he had called the deflection immediately, quietly, without any drama. She put her hand in her pocket. The jade pin was there. She turned it in her fingers. The crane's small carved wings, the worn, smooth weight of it. She made her decision before she had fully recognized she was making it. That was how her decisions usually worked. The thinking part was largely visible to her, but the actual moment of decision happened slightly below the surface, in some quieter place, and arrived announced. She was going to go. She would send a reply to the letter. She would go to the estate when he suggested, and she would speak with him, and she would be careful, and she would be honest, and she would see what he actually meant by all of this. And if it turned out that the purpose behind it was something she had not expected and had no way to manage, well, she had managed 4 years in this house. She could manage a conversation. She went to the small writing desk by the window and found paper. She wrote, "I will come, tomorrow morning, if that is acceptable. I would prefer to come without a household companion. L. Crane." Short, direct, no decoration. She folded it and sealed it with a plain wax impression, and went downstairs to give it to the Ashford household staff member who was, as it turned out, still waiting in the entrance hall with the patience of someone who had expected to wait. Clara was in the sitting room off the hall. The door was not fully closed. Lily did not look toward it as she passed. She gave the letter to the waiting staff member. He bowed slightly and left. She went back upstairs. She was on the 2nd step when Clara's voice came from the sitting room, easy and warm, carrying through the slightly open door. "Lily, come and sit with me." Lily stopped. She turned and looked at the sitting room door. This was the voice. The particular warm, maternal, concerned voice that Clara had stored and only took out on specific occasions. The voice that meant something was being managed. Lily had learned to recognize it the way you learn to recognize the smell of rain before it comes. Not from the rain itself, but from the pressure change in the air before it. The way the world shifts slightly and tightens. She went into the sitting room. Clara was at the window with her morning tea, already dressed, her hair perfectly arranged. She gestured to the chair across from her. "How is your shoulder this morning?" she said. "Better," Lily said. She sat. "I'm so glad." Clara looked at her with an expression of concern that was, technically, a flawless reproduction of concern. It was a terrible thing. "I want you to know I have spoken to Rosamond." Lily said nothing. She is devastated, Clara continued. She wants to apologize to you personally. You know how clumsy the staff can be, and she feels terrible that you were standing so close when it happened. Lily looked at the window beyond Clara's shoulder. The morning light was clean and white. You don't have to say anything, Clara said gently. I only want you to know that we are all concerned about you. And I was thinking, she set down her teacup with a small, deliberate sound, that perhaps for the next few days, while you are recovering, you might be more comfortable staying here. You could rest properly. The selection is quite tiring, especially for those of us who are not, well, who are not in a competitive position. She said the last phrase delicately, kindly, as if sparing Lily an embarrassment. Lily moved her eyes from the window to Clara's face. She held it there. That is very thoughtful of you, she said. I am planning to attend the estate tomorrow morning. Something moved through Clara's expression, very fast, gone almost before it arrived. Of course, Clara said, if you feel up to it. I do. Harriet would be happy to accompany you, she was just saying. I will be going alone, Lily said. Clara looked at her. Something was shifting in the room. Lily could feel it, the slow tilt of a thing that had been arranged in a specific way and was now, through some adjustment too small to see directly, no longer arranged that way. The Duke was very kind to me yesterday, Lily said. Her voice was level and pleasant. I would not want to impose an additional household member on his generosity. Clara was silent for 2 seconds. The silence was significant. Clara was not often silent when she had anticipated a conversation. Silences in Clara meant recalculation. Of course, she said again. This time the words had slightly less warmth in them, though she was controlling it. Whatever you think is best. Lily stood. Thank you for the tea, she said, though she had not been given any. She went upstairs and closed the door of her room and sat down on the bed. Her hands, she noticed, were very steady. She was not frightened. She was not sure exactly what she was, but it was not frightened. It was something more like the feeling of taking a step forward after standing in place for a very long time, the slight disorientation of movement after stillness, the adjustment of balance. She put her hand in her pocket. The crane was there. Long life, fidelity, the capacity to endure. She thought about her mother telling her that a crane could stand on one leg in a storm for hours without falling, not because it was strong, because it knew exactly how to balance. Tomorrow morning, the Ashford estate. She was going. She arrived at the Ashford estate at 8 in the morning. The streets were still moving through their earliest activity. Bakers pushing their carts, the night watch completing its final round before the day shift arrived, pigeons doing their particular indifferent business on every ledge and gutter. Lily had walked. It was a 40-minute walk from the house, and she had left early, partly to have the time, and partly because she had not wanted to ask Clara for the use of the carriage and have that conversation. The morning was cool. Autumn was settling in with more intention now, the trees along the avenue dropping leaves with a steady, unhurried purpose. She had dressed carefully, not in the plain dress she had worn to the selection, not because she wanted to impress anyone, but because the plain dress now had oil on the shoulder and smelled of the physician's herb paste, and she was not going to walk into a formal meeting smelling of herb paste if she had another option. Her other option was a dark green dress that had been her mother's and that she had altered twice over the years to keep it fitting correctly. It was a simple dress, with good lines and excellent fabric, and it was the nicest thing she owned. She did not know whether she was using that fact against herself, arriving in the best thing she owned to a meeting she had not yet understood. She had put the jade pin in her hair. She had not planned to. She had been sitting at the small mirror on her dressing table with the pin in her hand, having gone through the usual ritual of wrapping it back in its cloth and returning it to the pocket, and then she had looked at the mirror, and the decision had arrived fully formed from somewhere below thought. She put it in her hair. It sat just above her right ear, the carved crane facing forward. She looked at it in the mirror for a long moment. Then she picked up her bag and went downstairs and left the house, before the rest of the household was fully awake. The gate attendant at the Ashford estate recognized her, or rather, recognized that she was expected, which was different but had the same practical outcome. He admitted her immediately and sent word ahead. The estate, which had been full and ceremonial 2 days ago, was quiet now, in a way that seemed to belong to it. the quiet of a place that is large enough to absorb activity without being defined by it. A young woman named Nora, who was apparently the Duke's household assistant, met Lily inside the main gate with a brief, professional warmth and led her through a corridor that skirted the main reception rooms in favor of something smaller and more private. The corridor had good light from tall, narrow windows, and the floor was old stone, worn smooth at the center where feet had been passing over it for 100 years. They stopped at a door. "He'll be with you in a moment," Nora said. "There is tea inside." She left. Lily opened the door. It was a study, not a receiving room or a formal chamber, a working room, the kind that shows the character of the person who uses it, because it has not been arranged for guests. Bookshelves on 3 walls, many of the books with markers in them at various heights. A desk that was occupied in the way of a desk that is actually used, rather than one kept clear for appearances. A fire in the small hearth, which was generous, because the morning was genuinely cold. There was tea on the small table near the window, and the window looked out on the estate's inner garden. Lily sat down. She poured herself tea, because it was there, and because her hands wanted something to do. She looked at the garden. The roses she had seen from the east garden bench 2 days ago were visible from here too, darker in the morning light. Most of their summer color gone, but the shapes of the plants still full and deliberate, the way good roses look in autumn, slightly tired but nothing to apologize for. She heard the door behind her. She did not turn immediately. She heard him cross the room, heard the sound of the chair being drawn back across from her. Then she turned. William Ashford was wearing working clothes, not formal ones. Plain dark wool, no ceremony. He looked, she thought, considerably more like a person in working clothes than he had in the formal coat 2 days ago. And not in a lesser way. In a way that made the formal coat make more sense, that suggested the ceremony was something he put on because events required it, rather than something he needed. He poured his own tea. He did not lead with a greeting, and she appreciated that. Greetings were a form of social obligation that had to be met and then set aside before the actual conversation could begin, and she was tired of managing social obligations. "You came alone," he said. It was not a question. "I said I would," she said. Clara Voss did not argue. She managed it. Lily paused. She suggested Harriet accompany me. I declined. "Why?" She looked at him. "Because I did not want someone in that room whose job it was to report back what I said." He was quiet for a moment. Something in his expression, not quite a smile, but in the general direction of one. "Good," he said. He set his cup down. "I want to tell you what I know," he said, "and then I want to hear what you know, and then we can decide together what to do with it. That is the extent of my agenda. I have no other." She looked at him. "Most people with agendas say that," she said. "They do," he agreed. "I can't prove it to you before the fact. You'll have to decide whether to believe it as we go." She looked at the garden for a moment, then back at him. "All right," she said. "Tell me what you know." He did. He spoke clearly and without embellishment, the way he had written the letter, directly, without decoration, covering the necessary ground, in the necessary order. He told her about his father's acquaintance with Edmund Crane. He told her about the trading arrangement and its collapse. He told her about the third party who had, according to his investigation 2 years ago, engineered the collapse in a way that was not immediately visible. He told her the name of the third party, which was a man called George Harmon, who was a merchant of medium influence, who had been competing with Edmund Crane for a government supply contract, and had found that the most effective way to eliminate the competition was to make the competition appear incompetent. Lily sat very still while he talked. She knew the name. She had not known the name in this context before, but she knew the name. It had appeared in some of her father's correspondence, letters she had found in a box under his study desk during the first year after his death, before Clara locked the study. She had read the letters once, in a rush, without fully understanding their significance, and then she had been unable to get back into the study to read them again. George Harmon, a business name, an unremarkable name in a letter about supply routes and contracts and the particular dull machinery of trade. Not unremarkable now. "He is still operating?" she asked. "Yes, profitably." William's voice was level. He was never publicly connected to what he did. My investigation made the connection, but the investigation was private. I had no legal standing to act on it at that point, without evidence I could formally present to a court. And now, she said. That changed recently. He reached into the documents on the desk beside him and produced a small stack of papers, which he set in front of her. 6 weeks ago, another merchant filed a formal complaint against Harmon in the Commerce Court. A different scheme, but the same pattern, the same method of engineering a competitor's failure and making it appear self-inflicted. The complaint is documented and is currently working through the court system. Lily looked at the papers without touching them. And if Harmon is found liable in the current case, she said slowly, it creates grounds to re-examine previous cases. Including your father's, William said. She looked up from the papers to his face. The estate, she said. The property that passed to Clara Voss passed through a will made under circumstances that were affected by the financial losses Harmon engineered, he said. Your father made that will in the last months of his life, when his financial situation appeared considerably worse than it actually should have been. His estate was diminished. The will reflects that diminished estate. If the court determines that the diminishment was fraudulent, he stopped. I am not a lawyer, and I will not give you a lawyer's analysis. What I can tell you is that I have spoken to my own legal counsel, and the counsel believes there is a case to be made. Lily sat with this for a long moment. The fire in the small hearth made a sound. The garden outside was in its quiet autumn mode. She was doing something internal that did not show on her face, processing a thing that was very large, by very carefully separating it into its components and looking at each component individually, because looking at the whole thing at once was not something she was able to do yet. There was too much in the whole thing. Her father's name, cleared. The house. 4 years. She pressed her hands flat on her knees under the table. What do you want in return? She said. He looked at her. I don't want anything in return, he said. That is not a real answer, she said, quietly, without harshness. You are a duke. You spent 2 years investigating my father's business affairs. You walked across a formal selection courtyard and put your coat on me in front of 50 households. You sent your physician to my house and wrote me a letter in your own hand. People in your position do not do these things without a reason, and I would rather know the reason than spend the next period of time guessing at it. He was quiet for a moment. She noticed that the quiet was not the quiet of someone who did not have an answer. It was the quiet of someone who had the answer and was deciding exactly how to deliver it. There are 2 reasons, he said. The first is the one you would expect from anyone with a conscience. A wrong was done to your father, and it has not been corrected, and it should be. That is reason enough to pursue it. And the second reason, she said. He looked at her directly. The selection, he said. I am required to make a choice. My counsel has been requiring me to make a choice for 3 years, and I have been declining, because the candidates presented to me were not. They were perfectly appropriate candidates. I have nothing against any of them. I simply did not see, in any of them, the thing I was actually looking for. She waited. I am looking for someone who is serious, he said, who does not perform things, who has some experience of the world that includes its harder parts, and has not been broken by those parts, but has also not been made false by them, who, when poured burning oil, will stand still and breathe through her nose and keep holding the parasol. The room was very quiet. Lily looked at him for a long time. You are asking me, she said, carefully, making sure she was understanding correctly. I am telling you what I am looking for, he said, and I am being honest with you about the reason, because I think you deserve honesty, rather than the standard performance of a formal proposal, which I can provide if you prefer, but which seems, given who you are, like a waste of both our time. She looked at the garden. She looked at the papers on the table. She looked at him. I do not know you, she said. No, he said. That is accurate. I know what a person does in a courtyard, she said. I know what a letter looks like. I do not know what a man looks like when the formal event is over, and the letter has been sent, and the thing he wanted from a situation has been obtained. That is also accurate, he said. You want me to trust you, she said. On the basis of 2 days. I want you to consider it, he said. On the basis of 2 days. I am not asking for a decision today. I would not ask for a decision today. She was quiet for a moment. The investigation into my father's estate, she said. You said your counsel believes there is a case to be made. Will you pursue that regardless of what I decide? He looked at her steadily. Yes, he said. You're not using it as leverage, she said. No. She studied his face. She was very good at reading faces. 4 years of living with Clara had refined this skill to a considerable degree. She looked for the small tells that people did not know they were showing, the micro-movement at the corner of the mouth, the slight tension in the jaw, the way the eyes moved when a statement was not entirely true. She found none of those things. What she found was a face that was doing exactly what it appeared to be doing, which was looking back at her directly and waiting. Why didn't you find me earlier? She said. You've had this information for 2 years. He considered the question with what appeared to be genuine care. I did not know your circumstances, he said. I knew your father's name. I knew the broad shape of what had happened to his estate. I did not know you were living in that house in the way you were living in that house. When I saw you in the courtyard, the way you were positioned, the way they spoke to you, the way you moved through that space, I understood something I had not understood from the documents. She looked at him. You saw that I was the girl carrying the parasol, she said. I saw what 4 years with Clara Voss looks like on a person, he said. And I understood that the documents I had been keeping in a file were not abstractions. She picked up her teacup, set it down, picked it up again. The jade pin sat in her hair, the crane facing forward. She thought about her mother's words about standing on one leg in a storm. The capacity to endure was not the same as the capacity to be still. Enduring was not standing in place. Enduring was knowing when something had changed and adjusting the balance accordingly. Something had changed. I am not going to give you an answer today, she said. I know, he said. But I am not saying no, she said. He nodded. Carefully, not triumphant, she was watching for that. Simply careful, the way a person is careful when they are holding something that matters. Then I will ask you one more thing, he said. She waited. The remaining days of the selection are a formality, he said. They have been, since the moment I walked across that courtyard. I would like you to be present for them, not as a companion carrying a parasol, but as a candidate, if you're willing. She looked at him. Clara will, she began. Clara Voss, he said quietly, is going to have considerably larger concerns than her stepdaughter's presence at a selection. The sentence was simply stated. It was not a threat. It was the tone of a person informing you of weather that is coming. Lily sat with it. Then she stood, because she had been taught that standing first was what you did when a meeting had arrived at its natural conclusion, before the other person expected it to, and taking control of that moment was one of the few forms of control available to her, and she had learned to use it. I will consider it, she said. He stood too, easily, without ceremony. That is enough, he said. She looked at him for one more moment, standing in the working room with its books and its occupied desk, and the small fire in the hearth, and the garden outside the window that was going on being a garden with complete indifference to any of this. Then she said something she had not planned to say. My father would have liked you, she said. And she picked up her bag and walked out, before she could look at what was on his face when she said it. She walked home through the city, and the city did not notice that anything had changed. This was, she thought, one of the defining features of important private moments. The world continued to be completely itself, while you walked through it, with something enormous happening inside your chest that no one could see. The baker's cart was still there. The pigeons were still doing their business. 2 men at a corner were arguing about a fence line in the specific, tired way of people who had been arguing about the same fence line for a long time. She walked through all of it with the jade pin in her hair, and William Ashford's words moving through her head in a rotation that would not stop. She thought about the way he had said George Harmon, not with anger, not with drama, but with the particular flatness of someone who has been carrying a piece of information for a long time, and has learned to hold it at a slight distance, like a piece of evidence, rather than a wound. She had done that. She knew what it looked like. You learned to stop feeling the full weight of things constantly, because the full weight was too heavy to carry in every moment. You set it down to a carrying weight and kept walking. She thought about what he had said about the selection, that it was a formality, that it had been one since the moment he crossed the courtyard. She stopped at a corner and waited for a cart to pass. He had decided something in that courtyard that he had carried for 2 years without knowing he was carrying it. She understood this not in a romantic way, but in a practical one. People made decisions before they were ready to name the decisions, and sometimes the decision named itself through an action before the person could articulate it. He had crossed the courtyard. He had not sent a servant or made an inquiry through proper channels. He had walked across himself, and that walking was the decision already made. She was not a girl who believed in sudden certainty. She was a girl who had watched certainty be constructed from very uncertain materials over very long periods of time. But she was also a girl who had spent 4 years in a house that was not hers, carrying a hairpin that was not for wearing, standing in third position behind women she had been given no reason to respect, and she recognized what it felt like when something shifted in the fundamental architecture of a situation. Something had shifted. She turned down the street that led home. She did not want to go home. That was the clean, clear fact of it. She did not want to go back to that house and sit in her small room and listen to Rosamond's footsteps overhead and wait for Clara to make another arrangement. She wanted to stay in the city, in the morning, walking, with the jade pin in her hair, with the papers she had memorized, in the Duke's studies still available in her mind, with the particular weightless feeling of having sat across from someone and spoken honestly, without performing anything. She went home anyway, because home, for now, was where her things were, including the letters in the floorboard. Clara was in the sitting room when she arrived. This was, Lily suspected, not a coincidence. The sitting room door was open. Clara was visible through it, sitting with a piece of needlework that she appeared to be using as a prop for looking occupied rather than actually occupying herself with it. She looked up when Lily came through the front door. "How was it?" Clara said, warmly. "Productive," Lily said. She kept moving toward the stairs. "Lily," the voice had a particular quality. Not quite a command, not quite a request, something in the middle. The voice of someone who has decided that firmness is the appropriate approach this morning. Lily stopped. She turned. Clara set down the needlework. "Come and sit," she said, "please." The please was instructive. Clara did not usually add please. Please was for situations where she had calculated that the softness of the request would produce more effective results than the directness of one. Lily went into the sitting room and sat in the chair across from her. Clara looked at her for a moment. She was doing something that Lily recognized as assessment, a rapid, practiced scan of posture, expression, the small signals that experienced people read without acknowledging they are reading. Clara was very good at this. She had built her entire life on being good at this. "You are wearing the pin," Clara said. Her voice was entirely neutral, but the words had arrived very fast, which meant the pin was the first thing she had seen, and the most significant to her.
"Yes,"
Lily said. Clara looked at the pin, then at Lily's face, then at the pin again.
"Your mother's,"
she said. "Yes." Something shifted in Clara's face that Lily watched with attention. It was not quite guilt. Clara did not, as far as Lily had been able to determine, carry guilt in the ordinary sense. It was something more like recalibration. The pin meant something. It meant that Lily had made a decision, or was in the process of making one, and that the decision involved resources Clara had previously assumed were either unavailable or depleted. "How did the Duke seem?" Clara said, still neutral. "Like a man who knows what he wants," Lily said. She said it pleasantly. She was not performing pleasantness. She genuinely had no interest in being unpleasant to Clara this morning. She had something better than unpleasantness to carry, and she was not going to waste it on a quarrel in the sitting room. Clara was quiet for a moment. "Lily," she said, and this time the voice was different. Not the warm performance voice, not the managed neutral voice, but something closer to her actual voice, lower and more direct. "I want to speak plainly." "All right," Lily said. "You are 21 years old," Clara said. "You have no money of your own. You have no formal social position. You have a name, your father's name, which carries some historical weight but no current practical value, because the estate connected to it is no longer in your control." She paused. "You should understand what I am saying." "You are telling me I have nothing," Lily said. I am telling you that whatever is happening at that estate, Clara gestured toward the direction of the Ashford property, with a precision that made Lily think she had been watching from the window. It is not going to unfold the way you might be imagining. Men in his position do not behave irregularly without reason, and those reasons are not always the ones presented. I know that, Lily said. I am not saying this to be unkind, Clara said. I know that too, Lily said. She paused. You are saying it to be protective of an investment. The room went very quiet. Clara looked at her. Lily looked back. This was, she recognized, a moment that would not come again. One of those narrow windows where things could be said that had been unsayable before, where the balance had shifted just enough that the truth could be placed on the table without being immediately swept off it. I am not angry with you, Lily said. She meant it. The anger she had was not the consuming kind. It was the cold, functional kind she kept in reserve as a tool, and it was not what she was using in this moment. I understand that you made decisions about this household based on what was available to you and what you needed. I am not going to pretend I was not affected by those decisions, but I am also not interested in spending this morning being angry about them. Clara sat very still. What I am interested in, Lily said, is finding out the truth about my father's estate. Clara's face went through something, not the performed versions of things, but the real thing, quick and uncontrolled. For 1 second, she looked like a woman who had been waiting for that sentence for 4 years and had not known she was waiting for it. Then it was gone, and the controlled face returned. Your father's estate was settled legally, she said, by a court-recognized will. Made under circumstances that may have been fraudulent, Lily said. She said it quietly, not accusingly, like a woman presenting information. Clara's hands, Lily noticed, went very still on the arms of the chair. What has he told you? Clara said. Enough to begin asking the right questions, Lily said. Silence. Clara looked at the window. The morning was fully established now, the light white and clean. Outside, the city went on being the city. George Harmon, Lily said. Clara closed her eyes for 1 second. 1 second was all, but it was the most truthful thing Lily had ever seen on that face. You knew, Lily said, not accusingly, still quietly, but with the weight of it. You knew that the collapse was not my father's fault. Clara did not answer. You came into the house, Lily said. You married him. You knew the business was struggling, and you knew why it was struggling, and you stayed. Your father loved me, Clara said. Her voice was strange, flat and far away. The voice of someone who has been carrying a thing for a long time, and is tired of the weight. Whatever else you think of me, that was real. I believe you, Lily said. Clara looked at her sharply. I do, Lily said. I don't think it was all calculation. I think you loved him, and I also think that when he died, and the will gave you everything, you decided that the most practical thing was to protect what you had. And Rosamond and Harriet were your children, and you were going to protect them first. She paused. I understand that. I don't agree with what you did, but I understand why you did it. Clara was looking at her with an expression that was entirely unprecedented in Lily's experience of the woman. It was an expression that was trying to find a category for what was happening and failing. What do you want? Clara said. Finally. I want what is my father's, Lily said, which is also mine, and I am going to pursue that through the courts, with or without your cooperation, because the investigation is already underway, and I am not the one who initiated it. Clara breathed. And the Duke? She said. Lily looked at her for a moment. I am going to the estate tomorrow, she said, for the remaining days of the selection. Clara stopped. As a candidate, Lily said. The word sat in the room. Clara looked at the needlework in her lap. The needle was sitting at an odd angle, having been dropped at some point during the conversation, without either of them noticing. She reached down and straightened it with a small, precise movement. Rosamond will not, she began. I know, Lily said. This will be very difficult for the household, Clara said, socially. I know, Lily said, again. She stood. I know.
I am not trying to punish you, she said. I want you to know that. I am not doing this because I want to see you hurt.
I am doing this because I am 21 years old, and I have been invisible in this house for 4 years, and that ends today. Not because I am angry, though I have been, because I am done. She walked out of the sitting room. She went upstairs. She went to her room. She shut the door. She sat on the edge of the bed and pressed her palms flat on her knees and breathed slowly through her nose the way her mother had taught her. Then she reached up and touched the jade pin in her hair. The crane, facing forward. The worn smooth wings. The single leg. Rosamond was in the hallway outside her room. She could hear the particular quality of footsteps that paused and did not quite knock. The footsteps of someone who had been listening at the top of the stairs and was now standing outside a door deciding what to do about what they had heard. The footsteps did not knock. They moved away. Lily let out a slow breath. She went to the small writing desk and found paper. She wrote 2 letters. The first was to the Commerce Court Records Office, formally requesting access to any documentation relating to Edmund Crane's estate proceedings. The second was to a solicitor, whose name she had found in her father's old papers, a man named Arthur Cole, who had handled the preliminary estate work before Clara had changed solicitors after the funeral. She did not know if Arthur Cole was still practicing. She did not know if he would remember her father or be willing to speak with her. She did not know if any of this would move quickly or slowly or at all. She sealed both letters and set them to one side. Then she went to the loose floorboard beneath the bed and took out the cloth-wrapped bundle of her mother's letters. She had read them once, in the first weeks after finding them, quickly, in the middle of the night, in the panic of a person who had just realized the study was going to be locked, and this might be the only chance. She had not had time to read them carefully. She had taken them and hidden them, and had not fully processed what was in them, because processing them would have been too much on top of everything else. She was going to read them now. She sat on the floor with her back against the bed and opened the first letter. Her mother's handwriting was neat and slightly hurried, the writing of a person who had many things to do and thought quickly. Her name had been Eleanor. Eleanor Crane, born Eleanor Marsh, from a family that had been respectable without being prominent, a family of educators and minor officials who had cared very much about doing things correctly and not at all about being seen doing them. The letters were to her father, written when he was traveling on business, which he did several times a year in the early years of their marriage. They were, Lily read the first one slowly, the second more slowly still, the letters of a woman who was genuinely happy, which was not a thing Lily had seen very much of in the last 4 years, and the happiness of them was startling, in a way that was also painful. The third letter had a name in it, George Harmon. Eleanor wrote, Edmund, I want to tell you what Mrs. P said at the market this morning, because I think you should know. Harmon was there, and he spoke to her about the Northern contract in a way that bothered me. I cannot say exactly why it bothered me, except that it was too easy. The way he spoke about it. The way he seemed to already know what was going to happen with the contract before it was decided. You know I trust your judgment in business things more than my own. But I wanted to write it down while it was fresh because sometimes the things that bother us without reason are the things that should have bothered us from the beginning. Lily read the letter again. Her mother had felt it. She had felt it and she had written it down. She had not known what it meant. None of them had known what it meant until it was too late. But it was written down, in Eleanor Crane's own handwriting, in a letter dated 10 years ago. The timeline it established, the time at which Harmon had been watching the Northern contract, planning around it, moving pieces on a board that her father had not known was a board, was 10 years ago. This was evidence. Not definitive evidence. Not the kind that walked into a court and presented itself, but the kind that added a piece to the shape of a pattern that Arthur Cole or anyone else could use to argue the longer timeline of Harmon's interference. Lily put the letter down. She sat for a moment with the weight of it. Then she picked up the stack of letters and began to read the rest of them. The remaining days of the selection were a transformation that nobody in the city had anticipated, and that everybody, it seemed, wanted to watch. She arrived at the Ashford estate the following morning, not at the back gate, but at the front, not carrying a parasol, but simply walking, in her mother's green dress, with the jade pin in her hair. The gate attendant had her name on the formal guest list, which he checked with a deliberate attention that she suspected was itself a kind of statement, making sure she saw that it was there, that it had been placed there officially, that there was nothing provisional about it. She was shown to a room near the main reception hall where the candidates assembled. Not the room she had occupied as a companion. A different one, larger, with a mirror and a dressing table and a household maid who asked if she needed anything. The maid's manner was entirely matter-of-fact, which Lily appreciated. She did not want anyone to be significant about it. She just wanted to get through the morning. The other candidates were already assembled when she entered the room. There were 9 of them. Some Lily recognized from the selection day, dressed now in their next best after the first day's best. They looked at her with the immediate social calculation of a group that has already established its internal dynamics and is processing an addition. Most of the looks were curious. 1 or 2 were guarded. None of them were, she thought, unkind. They simply did not know what to do with her, which was fair, because she did not entirely know what to do with herself. A young woman named Delia crossed the room and said, with a directness that Lily liked immediately, "You're the one from the selection day, with the oil." "Yes," Lily said. "Does it still hurt?" "A little. Less than it did." Delia nodded, as if this was exactly the information she required. She had a practical, bright face, and the look of someone who had grown up being told to be decorative and had found the instruction moderately insulting. "My mother is furious," she said cheerfully. "She spent 2 months preparing my presentation, and he apparently decided in the first 15 minutes. Lily looked at her. "Do you mind?" she asked. Delia considered this seriously. "About being selected or not selected? No. Honestly, no. I was doing this because it was the expected thing. He seems like a good man, but," she glanced at Lily with something that was very nearly a grin, "I was mostly looking forward to telling my aunt I had attended, because my aunt has been insufferable about her own daughter's candidacy, and I was very much looking forward to the smug feeling of having been present while her daughter was not chosen." Lily found herself almost smiling. Almost. She did not have the easy access to smiling that she once had. There was no specific reason. She had not made a decision not to smile. It had simply become less frequent over years of living in a house where smiling felt like offering something that would be used against you later. She was aware that this was something she wanted to recover, and that recovering it would take time, and that time was now apparently something she was going to have. She sat in the room and waited for the morning session to begin. The sessions, she discovered, were less like the formal presentation of the first day, and more like a series of structured conversations. Groups and pairs and individual exchanges with the Duke and various members of his household, and occasionally with a small council of advisors, who were apparently assessing the candidates for social and practical qualities beyond appearance. The advisors were 4 in number, 3 men and a woman of about 50, who was the sharpest person in the room, and who Lily later learned was the Duke's chief administrator, a woman named Mrs. Franklin, who had been running the practical operations of the Ashford estate for 15 years, and who held opinions about the quality of candidates, with the frank efficiency of someone who has learned that politeness about genuine assessments is a waste of everyone's time. Lily's first session was with the advisors. She sat across the table from them in a small, well-lit room, and they asked her questions. Some of the questions were the expected formal sort, about her household, her education, her accomplishments. Some of them were not. The woman, Mrs. Franklin, asked her what she thought about the management of the city's East District water supply, which was apparently a current administrative problem, and watched her face while she answered. Lily had walked through the East District regularly for years. She knew where the pipes ran close to the surface, and where the delivery delays happened, and which streets had the worst standing water problem after rain, because she had lived in the city at street level rather than from the comfortable distance of a carriage window. She told them what she knew. Mrs. Franklin made a small note. She did not tell Lily whether the note was positive or negative. After the advisor session, there was a group discussion in the large room, all candidates together, on the topic of estate management during adverse conditions. Essentially, what did they know about running a large household when things went wrong? This was a more interesting conversation than Lily had expected. Delia turned out to have genuine practical knowledge from her family's northern estate. A quiet girl, named Clara G., not to be confused, Lily noted privately, with Clara Voss, had extensive knowledge of agricultural matters that she had been taught to present decoratively, but which were actually substantial. Several of the others had less practical knowledge but more confidence, which was its own form of presentation. Lily spoke when she had something to add, and did not speak when she did not. She did not perform. She did not present. She was simply in the room, saying true things when she had true things to say. She saw William Ashford twice during the morning. The first time he was crossing the hall with his secretary and several documents, moving at the usual efficient pace, and he passed the doorway of the room where the candidates were assembled and glanced in briefly. He did not stop. He did not make an occasion of looking at her. He simply saw her, and she saw him see her, and then he continued. The second time was during the individual conversation sessions after the midday meal. She was shown into the same working room she had been in the day before, the books, the desk, the small fire, the garden through the window, and he was already there, standing at the bookshelf with a volume he closed and set aside when she came in. They sat across from each other with tea again. "How was the morning?" he said. "Mrs. Franklin asked me about the East District water supply," Lily said. Something moved across his face. "What did you tell her?" "The truth, as best I know it." "Which is?" She told him what she had told the advisors. He listened with the same quality of attention she had noticed in the morning of their first meeting, total and unperforming, the attention of someone who does not let their expression announce that they are paying attention but simply pays it. When she finished, he said, "The pipe repair is scheduled for next month. We've been managing the East District problem for 2 years." He paused. "You identified 3 issues the current maintenance plan hasn't addressed." She looked at him. "Are you surprised by that?" "No," he said. "I expected it." She looked at the garden. "You expected it," she repeated. Not quite a question. "Mrs. Franklin's question was a test," he said. "She gives it to everyone. Most candidates know it is a test and give a prepared answer about the importance of good governance." "And you told her to ask me anyway," Lily said. "I told her you would probably know something real about it," he said. "You've walked those streets." She looked at him. "How do you know that?" "You walk," he said. "You walked here yesterday. From the Voss house, which is 40 minutes. You know the city the way people know it, when they have been in it, at street level." He paused. "That is not common in the women who have attended this selection." Lily considered this. "You have been watching me," she said, not accusingly, as a fact. "Since the courtyard," he said. "Yes, no equivocation." She sat with this for a moment. "It is a strange thing," she said, "to be watched. I am not accustomed to it." "I know," he said. I think I understand something of what I mean by that. I don't want to tell you what your own experience is." She looked at him with a sharpened attention. "That is a careful distinction," she said. "It matters," he said. "I have a habit of assuming I understand things I have observed without having experienced them, and my administrator tells me it is my worst quality." "Mrs. Franklin?" "Yes." "What does she say?" He considered. "She says I am good at observing facts, and poor at accounting for the weight of them. That I can see what a thing is, but not always what it costs." Lily looked at him. "And what do you think?" she said. "I think she is often right," he said, evenly, without defensiveness, "which is why she has been my administrator for 6 years, and I intend to keep her." She turned her teacup in her hands. "What do you know about what the last 4 years cost me?" she said. He was quiet. "Less than I should," he said. "Tell me what you think you know," she said. He did. He spoke carefully, about the house, the social positioning, the legal arrangements, the slow compression of a person's circumstances from outside. He spoke about it the way his administrator had apparently trained him to speak about observed facts, accurately, but with the awareness that accuracy was not the same as understanding. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "You missed the small things," she said. "Yes," he said. "The small things are the weight of it," she said. "The documents, and the legal structures, and the financial arrangements. Those are the architecture of what was done. But the weight is in the kitchen in the evening when you are mending someone else's hem by the fire, and the sound coming through the ceiling is someone else's laughter in someone else's room in your father's house." She stopped. She had not intended to say that much. He did not look at her with pity. She was watching for pity, which she could not stand, and there was none of it. There was something else, a quality of attention that held what she had said without flinching from it, and without trying to immediately resolve it. "Yes," he said, "that is what I missed." They sat in the quiet for a moment. "The letters arrived this morning," he said, when the quiet had settled into something that could hold the change of subject. "From my legal counsel. They have reviewed the information about Harmon, and they believe the case is strong enough to bring to the Commerce Court formally." She felt the tightening in her chest that was not quite fear and not quite hope, but something between them. The physical sensation of a consequence arriving. "When?" she said. "Within the week, if the court accepts the formal complaint." She put her teacup down. "And Clara?" she said. "Clara is not being charged with anything," he said. "She received property under a will. That is not her crime, if she has one. The question of what she knew and when she knew it is more complicated, and not my place to determine." Lily nodded. She had thought about this. She had spent part of the previous night going around it and arriving at the same place each time. She did not want to destroy Clara. She wanted what was right. The destruction was not the same thing. "The house," she said. "If the estate is proven to have been fraudulently diminished, what happens to the house?" "That is for the court to determine," he said. "In broad terms, if the will is found to have been made under fraudulent conditions, it would likely be revisited. There are several possible outcomes." "Clara would lose it," Lily said. "Possibly," he said. "Partially or fully. With a court determination, there are legal protections for the current inhabitant in cases where they were not party to the original fraud. The outcome is not certain." Lily sat with this. She thought about Clara in the sitting room that morning, reaching down to straighten the needle in the needlework. The precision of that small gesture, the particular kind of control it represented. "I don't want her on the street," Lily said. William looked at her for a long moment. "There would be negotiated options," he said. "Financial settlement arrangements, legal frameworks that protect the current occupant while restoring the fundamental rights of the original heir." He paused. "My counsel can advise more specifically, but the process does not have to be all or nothing." She looked at the garden. Outside the window, the garden was having one of those mid-morning moments of full autumn light, clear and golden and entirely unsentimental, the light that makes things look clean rather than beautiful, that strips decoration and leaves the real structure of things visible. "I need to tell you something," she said. "All right," he said. "I found letters," she said. "My mother's letters, to my father. There is one that references Harmon, written 10 years ago. It establishes that my mother noticed something was wrong with him before my father was aware of the threat. Before the business collapse. Before any of it." He was very still. "That is significant," he said. "I know," she said. "I am sending it to Arthur Cole. He was my father's original solicitor." She paused. "I wanted you to know that I am not waiting for someone else to do this. I am doing this myself." "I know," he said. "You don't seem surprised," she said. "I am not," he said. She looked at him. "Stop expecting me to do exactly what you think I will do," she said. Not harshly, but clearly. He looked at her. Then, for the first time since she had met him, he smiled. Not the partial, almost smile she had seen twice before. An actual smile, brief and genuine, arriving and departing quickly like a thing that had not expected to be seen. "You are right," he said. "I apologize." "Don't apologize," she said. "Just notice when you do it." "Yes," he said. "All right." The morning session was ending. She could hear, distantly, the sound of the household beginning to move toward the midday arrangements. The other candidates would be assembling for the next scheduled activity. She should go. She stood. "I will be here tomorrow," she said. He stood too. "I know." She picked up her bag. She looked at the bookshelf on the way to the door. She could not help it. Books were one of the things she missed most specifically. One of the most concrete small deprivations of the last 4 years. Because books had been in every room of the house when her father was alive, and Clara had moved them to the study, and then locked the study. She had been in the city's public library when she could arrange the time, but arranging the time had required negotiating the household schedule and Clara's idea of what constituted appropriate activity for Lily, and it had become progressively harder. She stopped at the shelf and read the spines. "Borrow any of them," he said. She looked at him. "Any of them," he said again. No performance in it, just the simple statement. She turned back to the shelf and selected, After a moment's consideration, a volume on the history of the province's water system. She held it up briefly so he could see which one she had taken. His expression said he had not expected that particular choice. She walked to the door with it. "Tomorrow," she said. "Tomorrow," he said. She walked out through the corridor, and the main hall, and the gate, with the book under her arm, and the jade pin in her hair, and the city received her back into itself, with its usual complete indifference, and she walked home through it, feeling something she had almost forgotten the name of. She thought about it all the way home. By the time she reached the house, she had the name for it. She felt like herself. Arthur Cole was still practicing. He had an office on the far side of the legal district, on the second floor of a building that smelled of paper and the kind of dust that accumulates when a room is very full and very busy, and the person responsible for it has decided that dust is not the priority. He was 63, with white hair and a compact, careful way of moving, and when Lily introduced herself, he stopped mid-sentence and stood up from behind his desk and looked at her with an expression that was genuinely startled. "Edmund Crane's daughter," he said. "Yes," she said. He sat back down slowly, as though the news required physical processing. "I did not know where you were," he said. "After Edmund died, I attempted to, but Mrs. Voss had taken on the household accounts, and she indicated that the estate matters were fully resolved." He stopped. "She indicated that you were not," he seemed to be searching for what had been implied to him without being stated, "that you were settled and comfortable." "I was in the house," Lily said, "less comfortable than described." He looked at her for a moment. Then he said, "I should have pursued it further." "Yes," she said, evenly, not to wound him, simply because it was true. He was quiet for a moment. "Sit down," he said. "Please, tell me everything." She told him everything. The organized version. She had worked on this in her room the previous evening, organizing the information the way she arranged tasks in the house, by priority and sequence, cutting anything that was emotional rather than factual, because she needed him to understand the situation clearly, and emotions, however legitimate, were not evidence. She told him about the trading arrangement collapse and what William had found. She told him about George Harmon and the current Commerce Court complaint from the second merchant. She told him about the letters and the one that referenced Harmon 10 years before the collapse. She set the letter on his desk. He read it. His face changed as he read it. When he looked up, his expression was different. The mild, careful, professional manner was still there, but underneath it, something had sharpened considerably. 10 years, he said. He was watching the Northern contract from the beginning, Lily said. My mother noticed something about how he spoke of it. She thought he knew the outcome before it was decided. Because he had already arranged the outcome, Arthur Cole said. He set the letter down. Your father had strong grounds for that Northern contract, Miss Crane. I prepared the original bid myself. There was no legitimate reason for the committee to reject it in favor of Harmon, except that the committee had been influenced. He paused. I suspected it at the time. I did not have the evidence to prove it, and the will had already been executed by the time I was positioned to investigate anything. He convinced my father his business was failing, Lily said. My father made the will, reflecting a diminished estate that should not have been as diminished as it was. If the estate were assessed at its true value, Arthur Cole began. The will looks very different, she said. Yes. He was quiet for a moment. Miss Crane, I need to tell you that this is a complex case. We are dealing with events that are 4 to 10 years old. Documentation may be missing. Witnesses may be difficult to locate. The law is not, it is not always swift or certain. I know, she said. I am not expecting swift. He looked at her. What are you expecting? I am expecting to try, she said, and to be told, by someone who knows the law properly, what the honest chance of success looks like. He considered her. Your honest chance, he said slowly, depends on several things. The outcome of the current Harmon case in the Commerce Court, which is the linchpin, because if the pattern of his interference is established there, it makes the argument for your father's case significantly stronger. The availability of documentation from the trading arrangement period, some of which may still exist in the court record system, and the cooperation or non-cooperation of the Voss household, which currently holds whatever physical documents remained in your father's study. Clara's locked study. Lily had not been inside it since the month after her father died. "What would you need from the study?" she said. "Original contracts, correspondence, financial records from the period surrounding the Northern contract rejection. Anything that shows the gap between what your father believed his financial situation to be and what it actually should have been." "Clara will not give them willingly," Lily said. "No," Arthur Cole agreed. "But a formal court inquiry can compel document production. If we initiate proceedings, the court can issue an order requiring the current holder of the estate to produce relevant materials." Lily sat with this. Initiating proceedings, the formal machinery of the courts, setting into motion. Clara, receiving a court order. Rosamond understanding what was happening. The whole careful structure of the last 4 years suddenly subjected to a different kind of examination. She was not afraid of it. She was clear-eyed about what it would cost in terms of social friction and difficult days, and the particular exhausting work of enduring things that were unpleasant. But she was not afraid. "Do it," she said. He looked at her for a moment with the attention of a man confirming that the instruction was fully meant. "All right," he said. He reached for paper and began to write. She spent 2 hours in his office. He asked questions. She answered them. He explained legal processes in plain language that she appreciated, not condescending, not performing, just informative. The language of someone who has learned that clients understand their own situations better when they understand the law operating in them. When she left, she had a slightly different sense of the world's possible configurations than when she had arrived. Not hope in the optimistic sense. She had learned to be cautious with optimism, because optimism that arrives too fast is fragile. But something more structural, a sense of the actual shape of the path ahead, its real difficulties, and its real possibilities, which was more useful than any amount of reassurance. She walked to the Ashford estate because she had a late afternoon session with Mrs. Franklin that had been arranged the previous day. Mrs. Franklin's office was in the working section of the estate that most guests never saw, the part behind the formal rooms where the actual management of a large household lived. It was an organized room with a great deal of paper in it and a window that looked out on the stable yard rather than the garden, and Mrs. Franklin was at her desk when Lily arrived, writing something quickly and finishing it before she looked up. "Sit," she said, without preamble. She was, Lily had decided, a woman who used words with the economy of someone who has learned that most conversations would benefit from about 40% fewer of them. Lily sat. "I have a question," Mrs. Franklin said. She set down her pen. "Not a test. An actual question." "All right," Lily said. "He's made his decision," Mrs. Franklin said. "I have seen him make decisions for 6 years, and I know what it looks like, and this is it. I am not asking you about whether to accept or not accept. That is between you and him. I am asking you this. What do you need from this estate that you have not yet been given?" Lily looked at her. The question was startling in its directness. She had not been prepared for it. She sat with it for a moment. "Time," she said. Mrs. Franklin waited. "I have been in a situation I did not choose for 4 years," Lily said. "And now the situation is changing, and the change is happening in a direction I want it to go, but it is still happening quickly. I need time to know the difference between what I am choosing and what I am being relieved to accept." Mrs. Franklin looked at her. "Yes," she said. "That is the correct answer." Lily blinked. "There is not a right answer," Mrs. Franklin said, seeing the reaction. "But there is a honest one. Most people give me the one they think I want to hear. You gave me the one that's true." She picked up her pen. "He is a good man, in the important ways. He is also used to decisions. Once he makes one, he moves on the next one quickly, and sometimes the people around him are still processing the previous one, while he is already 3 steps ahead." She paused. "I tell him this regularly. He is improving." Lily looked at her. "Are you advising me to be patient with him?" she said. "I am advising you to be direct with him when he is moving too fast," Mrs. Franklin said, "which is what I do, and which works better than patience in the long run." She made a note on the paper in front of her. "He responds to direct." "I've noticed that," Lily said. Mrs. Franklin looked at her over her pen with something that was not quite a smile, but occupied the same space. "Good," she said. "That will simplify things considerably." She returned to her writing. which was apparently Lily's signal that the meeting was concluded. Lily stood. "Mrs. Franklin," she said. The administrator looked up. "Thank you," Lily said. Mrs. Franklin made a very slight inclination of her head and returned to her writing. Lily left the office and went back through the working corridors toward the main section of the estate, and she was halfway down the library corridor when she almost walked into William. Not literally, she stopped in time, but nearly. He had come around the corner from the main hall, and they both paused in the corridor with about 3 feet between them. He looked at her. She looked at him. "I did not know you were still here," he said. "Meeting with Mrs. Franklin," she said. "Ah." A brief pause. "How was that?" "Useful," she said. "She is very direct." "She is the most direct person I have ever employed," he said. "I consider it a significant management advantage." They were standing in the corridor with the library on one side and the connecting passage to the east garden on the other, the same corridor she had walked yesterday, the same light from the narrow windows. The evening was beginning to change the quality of it now. Softer, slightly amber, the particular light of late afternoon in autumn that makes old stone look like it is remembering something. "I went to Arthur Cole today," she said. His expression adjusted, not with surprise, but with something that was attending. "And?" "He is initiating proceedings," she said. "He is filing for document access first. The court will compel production if Clara does not comply voluntarily." He nodded. "My counsel will be in contact with his," he said. "I indicated they should coordinate. If that is acceptable." She looked at him. "You indicated they should coordinate," she repeated, "before I told you I had been to see him." A very brief pause. "Yes," he said. She held the look. "I told you," she said quietly, "to notice when you do that." He held her gaze. "You did," he said, "and I am noticing. I arranged it yesterday because it seemed the practical step, and I should have told you I was doing it before I did it." She was quiet for a moment. "Why didn't you?" she said. "Because I made the decision and moved to the next one before I had registered that this one involved your situation and not merely my own administrative concerns." He paused. "Which is exactly what Margaret told you I do." "Margaret," she said. "Mrs. Franklin." "Yes," he said. "She told you about our meeting already," Lily said. "She mentioned she was meeting with you," he said. "Not the content. She would never do that." Lily looked at him in the amber corridor light. The thing about him, she thought, was that he was genuinely trying. Not performing the trying, not giving her the language of effort while doing something else underneath. Genuinely trying to account for himself and his habits and his management instincts in the context of a situation that required different instincts. She had watched people perform accountability before. She knew the shape of the performance. This was not it. "The coordination is fine," she said. "Tell me first next time." "Yes," he said, "I will." She looked at him for another moment. There was a quality in the corridor that she was aware of, not tension, but something adjacent to it, the quality of a space that has become significant simply by having two people stand in it and speak honestly to each other several times. It was accumulating, the significance. She noticed it the way you notice the temperature of a room changing. She shifted her bag on her shoulder. "I should go," she said. He did not move from where he was standing, but something in his posture changed fractionally, a very slight realignment, like the adjustment of someone who has decided to stay in one place rather than follow a movement. "Will you be here tomorrow?" he said. "Yes," she said. "The final session of the selection is tomorrow morning," he said. "After that, the formal process ends." She looked at him. "After the formal process ends," she said carefully, "what happens then?" He met her eyes. "I ask you a question," he said, "and you answer it." She was quiet. "What question?" she said. "The same one I have been asking you since the courtyard," he said, just in words, this time. She stood in the corridor with that. Then she said, "Ask me tomorrow." He nodded. "Once." She walked past him, and through the main hall, and out through the gate, and she did not look back. She had learned from 4 years of living in a house that required constant awareness of what was happening behind her, that the most powerful thing she could do with a moment that had gone exactly right was leave it alone. She walked home. Above her, The first stars were beginning to appear in the early evening sky, small and very still, indifferent to everything below them, in the ancient way of things that have been around long enough to stop being impressed by urgency. She looked at them while she walked, tilting her face up for a moment to find the specific pattern she had learned as a child from her father, who had known all the constellations by name and had taught them to her one at a time on summer evenings in the garden. She found the one she was looking for, the long arc of it, steady and unchanged. Her father had told her once that stars were there before us and would be there after us, and that this was not sad, but simply true, and that knowing it made the present moment more precise rather than less. She kept walking. The house, when she reached it, was lit in the windows, the ordinary amber of interior lamps. Rosamund's figure was briefly visible crossing the upstairs window, sharp and dark against the light, moving with the particular jerky speed of someone who is not going anywhere specific but cannot stay still. Lily stood outside the gate for a moment. She reached up and touched the jade pin in her hair. Then she went inside. She did not sleep much. This was not the sleeplessness of anxiety, or rather, it was not only that. It was the sleeplessness of a person whose mind has had too much to do in a single day and will not stop doing it, even when the body has stopped. She lay in the small room at the back of the house and thought about Arthur Cole and court proceedings, and her mother's letters, and about the corridor in the Ashford estate, and the amber light in it, and about what a question asked in words would look like coming from a man who was direct about most things, but careful about this one. She thought about the jade pin on the dressing table. She had taken it out of her hair when she came home. Set it down carefully in its usual place. It caught the dim light from the window, a small pale gleam in the dark. Around midnight, she heard the sounds of the house settling into sleep. Rosamund's footsteps overhead, which had been restless all evening, finally stopped. The particular creak of Clara's door. She had learned to identify every door in the house by its creak, which was the kind of knowledge you accumulated in 4 years of needing to know where people were, settled into silence. Lily got up. She lit the small candle by the bed and sat at the writing desk and read the rest of her mother's letters. All of them. From the beginning, in order, the way she had been unable to read them when she first found them. They spanned 8 years of her parents' marriage. The ones from the early years were full of the particular warmth she had already encountered in the third letter, her mother thinking out loud, reporting small interesting things, sending love across the distance, in the form of observations about daily life. Her father had kept all of them, which told her something about him that she had already known, but was glad to be reminded of. The later letters were shorter. The traveling had become less frequent as Edmund's business difficulties grew, and so there were fewer letters, and they were marked by a thinning of the easy warmth, not coldness, not strain, but the quality of two people who were managing something together, and were tired. There were 3 that mentioned Harmon by name. The first was the one she already had. The second was 2 years later. Eleanor writing about a business meeting Edmund had described to her in a previous letter, saying that she could not explain it, but Harmon's continued involvement in Edmund's trading circle made her uneasy, that there was something in his manner that reminded her of the way certain plants grew into a space, gradually, without drawing attention, until they were very established, and it was too late to remove them cleanly. The third was 6 months before Eleanor died. A brief note, only one side of a page. Edmund, I have asked Henry to look into Harmon properly. I know you will say it is unnecessary. I am asking anyway. Love to you and to our girl. Henry. Lily did not know who Henry was. She wrote the name in her notebook and circled it. Her mother had been trying to find out. In the last months of her life, Eleanor Crane had been asking someone named Henry to investigate Harmon. Whatever Henry found, if anything, had not made it into the letters. Eleanor had died 8 months later of a fever that moved too fast for the physicians to manage, and whatever she had set in motion had apparently not been far enough along to produce results, or the results had not been shared with Edmund, or Edmund had set it aside in his grief and never returned to it. Henry. Lily put the letters away carefully in the floorboard. She blew out the candle. She lay in the dark and thought about a man named Henry, who her mother had trusted enough to ask for help, who might be anywhere now, might be dead, might be living quietly somewhere in the city, might be holding information that had been waiting for 20 years to be connected to someone who would know what to do with it. She added it to the list of things to tell Arthur Cole. She slept just before dawn, briefly and efficiently, the way she had learned to sleep in the years when sleep was a thing she had to take in available windows, rather than in comfortable unbroken hours. The morning of the final selection session was different from the others. She knew it when she stepped out of the house and felt the quality of the air, sharper than recent days, the cold that arrives when autumn decides it is done with compromise. The trees along the avenue had made significant progress overnight on their seasonal work. Leaves were down in volume now, swept to the gutters and corners by a wind that had been through sometime in the night. The city looked cleaned. She walked to the estate. The gate attendant's manner was slightly different this morning, not unprofessional, but with a quality of heightened attention that told her that the staff understood what today was, that there had been communication about it within the household, that the ordinary routines had a slightly different energy, because the selection was ending, and what it ended into had apparently been made clear. Nora met her at the inner gate. "The other candidates are in the main reception room," she said. "He'd like to speak with you separately first, if that's all right." Lily looked at her. "All right," she said. She was taken to the working room again. The fire was burning. The garden was visible through the window in its clear autumn morning version. He was not there yet. She sat down. She looked at the bookshelf. The gap where she had taken the water history volume was clearly visible. She had read most of it the previous night, in between the other reading. It was well written, the kind of technical history that is actually interesting if you care about how things work, which she did. She had made notes in her notebook about sections that related to the East District problem. She had been going to bring it back today but had forgotten it on the dressing table in the rush of the morning. She would return it on a future visit. The thought stopped her. A future visit. Already assumed. The future she had spent 4 years not allowing herself to assume was already being mapped out in passing, in small practical thoughts about returning borrowed books. The door opened and he came in. He was carrying something, a folder of papers, and he was in his working clothes again. He sat down across from her and set the folder on the table and looked at her directly. "The court received Arthur Cole's filing this morning," he said. "My secretary confirmed it an hour ago." She absorbed this. That was fast. "Cole is efficient," William said. "And the filing is straightforward. It is a petition for document access, which is a well-established process. The court will issue a notice to the Voss household within the day. Clara will receive it today," Lily said. "Yes." She sat with this for a moment. Not with dread. She had made the decision, and the decision was made, and she did not revisit it. But she was aware of what today was going to feel like in that house when the court notice arrived, and she was, despite everything, aware of a thing that was not quite sympathy, but was adjacent to it. Clara was not entirely a simple character in her own story, whatever she had done. "The Commerce Court ruling in the Harmon matter," William said. "My counsel received a preliminary indication this morning. The court is moving toward a finding against Harmon in the current complaint." She looked at him. "How soon?" she said. "Weeks, not months," he said. "Once the finding is formal, it opens the precedent for examining previous cases in which he was involved." She nodded slowly. "I found something last night," she said. She told him about the letters, the second and third references to Harmon, and the name Henry. She gave him her notebook with the name circled. He read the note. He was quiet for a moment. "Henry," he said. "My mother trusted him. She was asking him to investigate privately. That was 12 years ago," he said. "Finding him is possible, but will take time. Cole is looking," she said. "I sent him a note early this morning." He looked at the notebook for a moment more. Then he looked at her. "I want to say something," he said. She waited. "You have been managing this investigation," he said. "Since the day you came here. You have been working it, thinking about it, finding things, making decisions. I want you to know that I see that." She looked at him. "The reason I am telling you," he said, "is that I have a tendency to take over situations that are moving in directions I care about, because I have a great deal of resources, and I am accustomed to using them. I am aware that this situation is not mine to take over. It is yours. I can help. I want to help. But the decisions are yours, and I will not make them without asking you first." The room was very quiet. She looked at him for a long time. "Mrs. Franklin must work very hard with you," she said. He looked at her. "She does," he said. "She has a system of signals. A raised eyebrow means I am about to say something I should think about for 3 more seconds. 2 raised eyebrows means I have already said it. Lily looked at him. She felt, moving through her, something that was not precisely humor but was in its family. A lightness that arrived without warning in the specific way that things arrive that you have not allowed yourself to expect. She looked away before it became visible on her face. "What is the question you said you were going to ask me today?" she said. He was quiet for a moment. "I am going to ask it," he said. "But first I want to know if you have had enough time. You said yesterday you needed time to know the difference between what you are choosing and what you are being relieved to accept." She looked at the garden. She thought about this seriously, the way she had learned to think about things, going through the actual content rather than the surface of it, looking at the real structure. She had spent 4 years not choosing. She had spent 4 years being arranged, positioned, directed. She had managed it with the available tools, patience, practicality, the jade pin in her pocket instead of in her hair, and she had not been broken by it, but she had also not been herself in it. The last several days she had been herself. The meeting with William, the letters, Arthur Cole, Mrs. Franklin, the corridor last night with the amber light, the early morning walk and the water history book, and the note to Cole about a man named Henry. All of it, she had decided. She had walked into it. She had not been managed into it. "Yes," she said. "I have had enough time." He looked at her. "Then I would like to ask you," he said, "whether you would be willing to consider, not to decide, but to consider, the possibility of this becoming a permanent arrangement." She looked at him. "You said you were going to ask in words," she said. He held her gaze. "Lily Crane," he said, "will you marry me?" The room was very still. The fire made a small sound in the hearth. Outside the window, the garden was in its clean autumn light. She looked at him, and he looked at her, and neither of them looked away. "I told you not to be surprised by what I do," she said. "I know," he said. "Then you should not be surprised when I tell you that I need 2 more days," she said. He was quiet for a moment. Then, 2 days. "Yes," she said. "Not because I am uncertain about the important things, but because I want to give you the same thing you just told me you were giving me, a decision that is fully made, rather than one made under the weight of the moment." He looked at her. He nodded. "Once. 2 days," he said. "Yes," she said. She stood. "One more thing," she said. He waited. "I need you to understand something about the way I will be in this, if I decide yes," she said. "I am not the version of me that those 4 years made. I know that version exists, and I know she was necessary to survive certain things. But she is not the whole of what I am. I am also the person my mother raised and my father expected to exist in the world, and she is considerably more. Considerable." He looked at her. "I know," he said. "You have seen 4 years of one version," she said. "You have not yet seen the other." "No," he agreed. "I have seen parts of her. In this room, in the corridor, in the garden. I am looking forward to seeing the rest." She held the look. 2 days, she said. 2 days, he said. She walked out. The morning session proceeded without her. She left the estate and walked to Arthur Cole's office and spent an hour with him, going through the court petition, and then she walked the East District, which she had been thinking about since Mrs. Franklin's question, and spent an hour observing the specific pipe locations and water delivery points she had described, writing notes in her small notebook in the clean morning air, with her boots getting slightly damp from the wet leaves on the pavement. She felt, doing this, like a person who was already somewhere she had decided to be. She stopped at a small coffee shop near the Records District and sat at a table by the window and ordered something warm and sat with it and watched the street outside and thought about 2 days. She thought about saying yes. She turned it over in her mind carefully, looking at it from multiple angles, checking the weight of it the way she had learned to check the weight of things. She checked it for the things she was afraid of, that she was choosing from desperation, that she was choosing the relief of the change rather than the actual choice, that she was going into something without clear eyes. She found that she was not. She was choosing from a place that felt, for the first time in years, like solid ground. She knew why she was choosing. She knew what she was choosing. She knew what she did not yet know, which was the answer to the question of what a man looked like after the formal event was over, after the selection had been concluded, in the ordinary long days of an ordinary shared life, and she accepted that not knowing as a thing that could only be known by living through it. She finished her coffee. She paid. She walked out into the city. One more day. The court notice arrived at the Voss house the following morning. Lily was in her room when it came, but she heard the delivery, the specific knock of a court officer at the front door, formal and deliberate, the kind of knock that announces itself as official before the door opens. She heard it, and she sat very still on the edge of her bed, and waited. Below her, the silence that followed the knock lasted 4 seconds. Then Clara's voice, very controlled, asking for something to be repeated. Then footsteps, many footsteps, moving through the house with the particular energy of people who have just received news that requires immediate and simultaneous processing in multiple rooms. Rosamond's door opened. Harriet's door. A brief, sharp exchange that Lily could not fully hear, but whose emotional content was entirely clear from the rhythm of it. Then Clara's footsteps on the stairs. She stopped outside Lily's door. She did not knock. She stood there for a moment. Lily could feel the standing, the particular weight of it, in the quality of the silence. She was waiting for something, or thinking something, or deciding something. Then she walked away. Her footsteps went back downstairs and across the entrance hall and into the study. The locked study. Lily heard, for the first time since her father died, the sound of that door opening. She closed her eyes. She sat with the sound for a moment, the soft creak of a door that had not been opened in 4 years, the particular quality of air from a closed room meeting open air, small sounds from inside, a drawer, papers, the moving of something heavy. She did not go downstairs. She sat in her room for an hour while the house moved around her, and then she put on her coat and picked up her bag and went downstairs and out the front door. She walked to Arthur Cole's office first. He looked at her as she came in, with the expression of a man who has been expecting her. She opened the study, Lily said. He nodded slowly. The court notice has a response window of 48 hours, he said. She has 2 options: comply voluntarily with a document production request, or wait for a court order and comply under compulsion. Voluntary compliance looks better for her position in any subsequent proceedings. She is calculating which is worse, Lily said. Yes, he paused. Miss Crane, I have something to tell you about Henry. She looked at him. Henry Marsh, he said, your mother's younger brother. She sat down. She had not known. She had never known. Her mother had spoken of her family occasionally but rarely in specifics. The Marsh family was a quiet one, she had said. People who kept to themselves and did not make a great deal of noise in the world. And Lily had never met them, because Eleanor had died when Lily was 13, and the family connections had not survived the transition to Clara's management of the household. She had not even known her mother had a brother. He is still alive, she said. He is, Arthur Cole said. He is 71. He lives in the north end of the city. He passed a piece of paper across the desk. I found him through the Marsh family records at the registry office. It took 2 hours. He paused. He left a document. What kind of document? An affidavit, he said, sworn and notarized, dated 9 years ago. He passed a second paper across the desk. Lily picked it up and read it. Henry Marsh had investigated George Harmon. He had done it at Eleanor's request, starting 12 years ago, before Eleanor died, and he had continued it after she died, on his own, because he had found enough in his initial inquiry to believe the matter was worth completing. The affidavit described, in careful and specific terms, the mechanism by which Harmon had undermined Edmund Crane's bid for the Northern contract. It named 3 individuals in the contract committee who had received financial consideration from Harmon. It documented the timeline. It described the subsequent moves Harmon had made to ensure Edmund's trading situation deteriorated in a way that appeared to be Edmund's own failure. He had filed the affidavit with a notary 9 years ago, 2 years after Edmund died, intending to present it to a court. He had not done so because, as he noted in a covering letter attached to the affidavit, he had attempted to contact Clara Voss about the matter, and had been told by Clara that the family preferred not to pursue the matter as it would be distressing for the daughter, meaning Lily. Lily set the papers down. She looked at the window of Arthur Cole's office. Henry Marsh had been holding this for 9 years, waiting for someone to come looking for it. He had approached Clara, and Clara had shut the door. He knew I was out there somewhere, Lily said. Yes, Cole said. He attempted to locate you twice, in the last 9 years. He was told both times that you were living comfortably with your stepfamily and had no interest in pursuing estate matters. Lily looked at the papers. She felt something move through her that was not quite anger, or rather, it was the specific kind of anger that is so established and so old that it has become something more like weather than fire, familiar and present, and part of the atmosphere of a thing, rather than a sudden event within it. Can I speak to him? She said. He is expecting you, Arthur Cole said. This afternoon, if you are able. She stood. Thank you, she said. Miss Crane. He looked at her from behind his desk. The affidavit alone, combined with the Commerce Court finding against Harmon, is substantial. What I mean is, this is not a small thing anymore. This is not a matter of legal complexity and uncertain outcome. The evidence for your father's case is now, I believe, compelling. She looked at him. How compelling, she said. Compelling enough that I would advise Clara Voss, if she were my client, to cooperate fully and immediately, and to consult her own counsel about a negotiated settlement rather than a contested proceeding. She said nothing for a moment. And if Clara does not cooperate, she said, then the court will compel her, and the outcome is likely to be less negotiated and more absolute, he said, which is her choice to make. She nodded. She went to Henry Marsh. He lived in a small house on the north side of the city, one of the older streets, where the houses were narrow and pressed together, and had been standing long enough to have developed opinions. The housekeeper who answered the door was a woman of about 60, with a brisk manner and a look that suggested she was used to managing a man who received unexpected visitors. Henry Marsh was in the front room. He was smaller than she had expected. Her mother had been tall, and Lily had somehow assumed the Marsh family shared this. He was slight, white-haired, with sharp eyes that were immediately and completely attentive when she came through the door. He was in a chair by the fire, and he did not try to stand, which she appreciated, because it would have been an effort, and she did not want to be the cause of an effort for a 71-year-old man who had been holding something for 9 years on her behalf. Lily Crane, he said. Yes, she said. He looked at her. You look like your mother, he said. His voice was matter-of-fact, the voice of someone stating an observation rather than making an emotional claim. Around the eyes, not the coloring. Your father's coloring. But the eyes are Eleanor's. She sat down across from him. The fire was warm. The room was full of books, the old kind, the kind that have been read rather than displayed. She asked you to investigate, Lily said. Yes, he said. 10 months before she died. She had been worried about that man for 2 years, and she knew your father would not pursue it himself, because Edmund he was not someone who looked for enemies. He assumed good faith in people until the evidence against them was very clear, which is a good quality in most situations, and a dangerous one in a specific set of others. She loved him for that, Lily said. She did, Henry said. She also spent the last 2 years of her life quietly trying to protect him from it, without his knowing, which is very Eleanor. They sat for a moment in the warmth of the fire. She wrote about you, Lily said. She did not tell me she had a brother. I did not know. His expression moved. Not dramatically. He was not a dramatic person. She could see that clearly. But something moved in it that was the kind of movement that belongs to old, specific grief. We were close when she was young, he said. After she married your father, the closeness became geography, time, the ordinary way that families drift. I did not try hard enough to keep it from drifting. He paused. I should have. You kept the affidavit, she said. Yes. For 9 years. I was waiting for you, he said simply. I did not know it would take 9 years, but I was waiting for you, or for someone connected to you, to come asking. Clara told you I was comfortable and not interested, Lily said. She did. His voice was even. I did not believe her, entirely. But I had no standing to present the affidavit to a court independently. It is not my estate. It is your father's. and without the legitimate heir or a legal representative of the estate bringing the claim. The document sat with the notary. Lily looked at the fire. She thought about 9 years. She thought about a man sitting in this room with a fire and books and his housekeeping, holding a piece of information that could have changed her last 4 years, waiting for a connection that had been deliberately prevented. She was not going to spend time being angry about what had been lost. That was a decision she had made in the months after her father died, and had reaffirmed many times since. Anger at what was past was energy that could not be recovered. She needed the energy for what was in front of her. But she let herself feel it for a moment, just a moment. The specific weight of what 4 years of the wrong information costs. Then she set it down. "I will need you to come to Arthur Cole's office," she said, "to confirm the affidavit in person." "Of course," he said. "When you need me, I will be there." She looked at him. "You are my mother's family," she said. It was not a question, and it was not a performance. It was a statement of a fact she was installing into the structure of her understanding of the world. It went into the structure quietly, and with a sense of something being restored to its correct position. "Yes," he said. She stayed for an hour. They drank tea, and he told her things about her mother that she had not known. Not the things in the letters, but the earlier things. The Eleanor, who had existed before Edmund and before Lily. The girl who had walked these same north streets and known these same old houses, and had been, apparently, someone who noticed things and acted on what she noticed, with a calm, practical decisiveness that had clearly descended through the family in a recognizable form. When she left, she stood on his doorstep for a moment before going down the steps. "I am glad you found me," Henry said from the doorway. He was standing now, managing the step with the slight caution of a man who is old enough to be careful. "I am glad you stayed findable," she said. He smiled. A small, complete smile. She went down the steps and into the street. She walked to the estate from there. She did not have an appointment. She had not sent word ahead. She arrived at the gate and gave her name, and the attendant recognized her, and sent word, and she was admitted within 3 minutes. Nora met her in the inner yard and led her, at her request, not to the working room, but to the inner garden. She had asked for the garden because she needed the open air and the space and the particular quality of a place where no one had arranged anything. She sat on the stone bench. She waited. He arrived in 10 minutes. He came through the garden entrance at a pace that suggested he had moved quickly from wherever he had been, but he arrived without urgency in his manner, controlled, steady, the same as he always was. He looked at her and she looked at him, and she could see that he was reading the quality of the look and was not sure yet what it contained. He sat beside her, not across from her, beside her, as he had the first time. "Clara opened the study," she said. "I know," he said. "Cole's secretary notified my counsel this afternoon." She looked at the garden. "There is something else," she said. She told him about Henry Marsh and the affidavit. She told him about the 9 years, and what had been waiting in them. She told him simply and in order, and without drama, because there was enough weight in the facts themselves, and they did not need her to add to it. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, 9 years. "Yes," she said. "He has been in this city for 9 years, he said, and she—" "Yes," she said. She knew. Another silence. In the garden, a bird was doing something in the old rose bushes, rustling around in them with a domestic, industrious energy, the behavior of a creature that has found the exact place it needs to be and is getting on with the business of being there. "William," she said. He looked at her. She had not used his name before. He registered it, not dramatically, but she saw it register. "I am going to say yes," she said. He was very still. "Not because of what you are offering me legally," she said, "and not because I am relieved to be leaving that house. I am going to say yes, because I sat with a man this afternoon who held a piece of information for 9 years out of loyalty to my mother's memory, and he told me that she acted on what she noticed, and she acted calmly and practically, and she loved her people the way people should be loved, which is to say, by doing the work of it rather than just claiming to. And I looked at him, and I thought about what she would have said about this situation." She paused. I think she would have told me to stop being careful about the thing that is actually right in front of me. He looked at her. She looked at him. Yes, she said. That is the answer. The garden was very quiet around them. Then he reached across and took her hand. Not dramatically. Simply. The way a person reaches for a thing they have decided to hold. She let him. They sat in the autumn garden in the clean, cold air, and the bird went on about its business in the rose bushes, and the city went on about its business beyond the walls, and neither of them said anything further, because nothing further was needed. The Commerce Court found against George Harmon 19 days later. The finding was formal and detailed, and it used language that courts use when they want the record to be very clear, not merely that the defendant had engaged in irregular practices, but that the practices were deliberate, systematic, and had produced documented harm to identifiable parties. The committee members who had accepted financial consideration from him were named. The timeline of his interference was laid out from the earliest documented point, which was, because of Eleanor's letter and Henry Marsh's affidavit, earlier than Harmon's own legal team had expected. Arthur Cole had the finding delivered to Lily at the estate, where she had been for 3 days. She read it in the working room, while William was at his desk, doing something with documents, and deliberately not watching her read, which was a courtesy she appreciated. When she set the finding down, he looked up. "How do you feel?" he said. She considered the question honestly. "Like the thing that was wrong has been named," she said. "It does not feel like winning, exactly. It feels like correction." He nodded. He understood the distinction. She knew he understood it, which was one of the things she had been learning over 3 days of proximity to him, in a context that was not formal, and not managed, and not selection-related. A context of actual daily life, meals and conversations, and the working rhythms of an estate, and occasional disagreements about the most efficient way to approach a problem, which they approached from different angles but were, she was finding, both willing to sit with, until they found the angle that was actually right, rather than merely the angle that favored either of them. She had not moved in yet, formally. That would wait for the ceremony, which was being arranged. She was still at the house, the Voss house, each evening, returning in the late afternoon, and sleeping in the small room, and walking back to the estate in the morning. It was not ideal, and it was not permanent, and it suited both her and William that she was doing it this way, that she was not running from one place directly into another without giving herself the space to make the transition with intention. Clara had complied with the document request. She had produced the contents of the study, not enthusiastically, not with grace, but she had produced them. What they contained had been exactly what Arthur Cole expected, a clear picture of Edmund Crane's business in its true state, before Harmon's interference had distorted it. Documentation that the estate should have been worth considerably more than the will reflected. Clara had not, apparently, known the full extent of what was in the study, or rather, Lily had thought about this carefully, and had arrived at a more complex understanding of it. Clara had known that the situation with the business was not entirely Edmund's fault, but had not known, specifically, the mechanism of the harm done to him. She had known something was wrong. She had not known the precise shape of the wrong, and in the years since his death, she had managed the knowledge of the something wrong by not looking at it directly, which was how most people manage things that were too complicated to examine cleanly. Lily had decided what she thought about Clara. She thought that Clara was a person who had entered a situation believing she could manage it, and who had made decisions that were too small to feel like decisions at the time, each one a minor compromise, a looking away, a practical accommodation, and who had not registered that the accumulation of small decisions was itself a large decision. She did not think this absolved Clara of responsibility. She did not think it made what Lily had lived through acceptable. She thought it was true, and that the truth of it was important to hold clearly, because it was more useful than the simpler story of Clara as a straightforward villain, and because Lily was going to need to have some kind of relationship with this woman for the foreseeable future, whatever form it took, and she preferred to do that with clear eyes. She had said this to William in one of the evening conversations that had become, she noticed, the part of the day she thought about during the parts that preceded it. They talked, properly, about real things, in a way that was becoming its own rhythm. He asked questions, and listened to the answers. She said what she thought, and waited to see how he held it. He had said, about Clara, That is a more generous analysis than I would arrive at. She had said, I know. I think I have more information than you do. He had considered this. Yes, he said. You probably do. That had been the first evening conversation she remembered thinking, I want more of this. Not the difficulty of it, or the drama of the circumstances that produced it, but the actual thing itself. Talking to someone who held what she said, without immediately turning it into something that served their own story. She had not had that in 4 years. The Commerce Court finding opened the formal process of examining her father's estate. Arthur Cole worked with William's legal counsel. The coordination had become natural, the two firms moving in an easy parallel because they were working toward the same outcome, and both of them were capable people who preferred efficiency over turf. Henry Marsh gave his formal testimony. The committee members named in the Harmon finding were contacted by the court, 2 of them, in the particular way of people who have been carrying guilt in silence for a long time, and are relieved to put it down, cooperated immediately and without resistance. The picture that emerged was complete, and, in its completeness, clear. Edmund Crane's estate, assessed at its true value, was substantially larger than the will had described. The gap was not recoverable in full. Years had passed, assets had moved. The law was not interested in the full complexity of what was practically restorable, but the recoverable portion was significant. Arthur Cole presented Lily with a figure that was larger than she had expected and smaller than it should have been, and she looked at it and understood that this was the shape that justice usually took, not the full restoration of what was wrong, but something real and solid that acknowledged the wrong had existed and had a cost. Clara agreed to a settlement. It was negotiated by the lawyers without Lily and Clara being in the same room, which was everyone's preference, including, Lily suspected, Clara's. The settlement gave Lily the formal recognition of her inheritance rights, a financial settlement from the estate's recoverable value, and the house itself, or rather, the option to take the house or to accept an equivalent value and allow Clara to remain in it, with a formal leasehold arrangement. Lily chose the leasehold. She did not want the house. She had made her peace with the house as a concept, with its cedar oil walls and the loose floorboard under the bed, and the kitchen where she had done most of her living for 4 years. But she did not want to live in it again. She wanted it to be her choice not to live in it, which was different from being unable to. The leasehold arrangement gave Clara a place to live, gave Rosamond and Harriet a home, and gave Lily the knowledge that she had managed the situation in the way her father would have recognized, cleanly, without excess, taking what was right and not more. Clara sent a letter. It arrived on a morning when Lily was at the estate, in the working room, which had become in practical terms something like her own space. She had returned the water history book and taken 3 others, and there was a notebook of her own on the table now, alongside the estate documents she had begun to review, in the context of helping plan the East District water pipe repair. She read the letter and set it down. She told William about it at the evening meal. She apologized, she said. He looked at her. Did she mean it? Lily considered. I think she apologized for what she did to me more than for what she did to my father, she said. The thing that happened to my father is too large for her to hold the full weight of, but the 4 years, I think she knows what the 4 years cost, and I think the knowing of it is something she will carry. She paused. That is enough. I am not looking for more than that. He looked at her for a moment. You are remarkably good at not wanting more than what is enough, he said. She looked at him. Is that a criticism? She said. No, he said. It is the opposite of one. He paused. I am the opposite. I tend to want more than what the situation produces, and I have to manage it. You manage the tendency better than I do. I had better practice, she said. Yes, he said. You did. The ceremony was arranged for the following month. It was a moderate ceremony, not small, because William's position required a certain scale, but not large in the excessive way that selection ceremonies sometimes produced as their inevitable social outcome, with every household in the city requiring an invitation, and the whole event becoming more about itself than about the people at its center. He had said, from the beginning, that he wanted the ceremony to be real rather than performative, and she had said that she wanted the same thing, and they had handed the practical arrangements to Mrs. Franklin with a brief that contained exactly 2 requirements, that it be honest and that the food be good. Mrs. Franklin had produced, within the week, a plan that met both requirements. Rosamond and Harriet were not invited. This was a decision Lily had made without particularly agonizing over it. She bore them no ongoing hostility. She had examined this carefully, the way she examined things, and she had found that what she felt toward Rosamond and Harriet was closer to the feeling you have about weather that was harsh. You acknowledge it. You are not shaped by it permanently, and you do not invite it into the ceremony that marks the beginning of the next part of your life. Harriet had sent a short note that was as close to an apology as she was probably capable of. Lily had written back something brief and not unkind. Henry Marsh was invited. He was, it turned out, quite good at ceremonies. He dressed well, and he sat in the front row, and when the formal acknowledgments were made, he was steady and present, and did not make an excessive occasion of his own emotion, which was the Marsh family approach to most things, and which Lily recognized with a warmth that had been building steadily since she first walked into his house on the North Street. He had told her, in the weeks between her engagement and the ceremony, about Eleanor. Stories she had not known, the Eleanor before marriage, the Eleanor who had walked the same North Streets Lily had walked for 4 years, without knowing she was retracing her mother's roots. The Eleanor who had been good at exactly the kind of patient, practical, precise attention to the world that Lily had thought was something she had developed on her own out of necessity. It was not something she had developed on her own. It was something she had been given. She thought about this in the days before the ceremony, with a feeling she could not entirely name. Not grief, though grief was part of it, and not joy, though that was part of it too. It was the feeling of understanding that the qualities she had leaned on hardest in the worst years were not the product of those years, but were older than them, were in her before they started, were hers, in a way that no arrangement of any house or any household or any stepmother's management of her circumstances could have reached. The morning of the ceremony she rose early. The room she was using in the estate's guest wing was larger and quieter than any room she had slept in for 4 years, and she had been slowly getting used to the largeness and the quietness, which was its own small adjustment. She washed and dressed, a dress that was not her mother's green one, and was not the plain blue one but was a new one, deep gold, made by a dressmaker in the city, who had been recommended by Mrs. Franklin, and who had asked Lily what she wanted the dress to say, and had listened to the answer, and made it accordingly. She sat at the dressing table. The jade pin was in her hand. She looked at it for a long time. The crane, carved into the pale green stone, the worn smooth wings, the single leg, the long neck. 12 years of her thumb working over it in moments that required steadiness. Every nervous morning, every held breath, every quiet hour in the kitchen at night. She put it in her hair, above her right ear, facing forward. She looked at herself in the mirror. The person in the mirror looked like herself. She did not look like the girl carrying the parasol at the selection. She did not look like the girl who sat alone in the East Garden during the midday interval. She looked like the person who had been inside that girl for 4 years, waiting with a patience that was not passive but was the active, chosen kind. The kind that knows the difference between waiting and giving up, and has decided to be the first rather than the second. She thought about her mother. She thought, I am wearing the pin. I am wearing it because I want to, not because I need something to hold on to. The needing was not wrong. The holding was not weak. But I do not need to hold on to it today. Today I am wearing it because it is my mother's, and I am her daughter, and I am getting married this morning, and she should be here. And since she cannot be here, the crane can be. A knock at the door. Nora. It's time, she said. Lily stood. She picked up her bag. Habit. She had carried a bag every day for years, and apparently did not stop carrying one simply because the occasion did not require it. And then she set it down again. She would not need a bag today. She walked to the door and opened it. The corridor was full of morning light, the particular clean light of autumn that did not flatter or dramatize but simply showed things as they were. It came through the tall windows in long, steady rectangles, falling on the old stone floor with the indifference of light that has been coming through these windows for 100 years and expects to be coming through them for 100 more. She walked down the corridor. At the far end, through the door that opened onto the estate's formal garden, she could hear the quiet sounds of the gathering, voices, movement, the particular purposeful hum of people who are assembled for something real. She did not hurry. She walked at her own pace, in the morning light, with the crane facing forward in her hair, and she arrived at the garden door, and opened it, and stepped through. The garden was full of people, arranged in the way Mrs. Franklin had arranged things, without excess, without performance, in the clear autumn air, with the old roses in their season, and the sky overhead doing what autumn skies do, which is to be very large, and very clear, and very straightforwardly itself. William was at the far end. He saw her come through the door. His face, when it found hers, did something that she stored carefully, and privately, the way she stored the most important things, not on the surface where they could be managed or performed, but in the deeper place that did not need to present itself. She would have it later, in the ordinary days, when she needed to remember what the beginning looked like. She walked across the garden. She had not run from anything to get here. She had walked the whole way. At a moderate pace, in the morning light, with good boots on the damp grass and a jade pin in her hair, she walked across the garden toward the man who had crossed a courtyard for her, and she arrived. She stood beside him. Around them, the city went on being the city. A cart somewhere outside the walls, a bird in the rose bushes, doing its domestic business. The sound of ordinary life proceeding with complete indifference to the particular weight and significance of this specific garden, this specific morning. She was glad for the indifference. It made the morning feel real rather than ceremonial. He looked at her. She looked at him. The officiant began to speak. Lily listened to the words, which were the old words, the ones that had been said in this city for a long time, and she stood very still, the way she had always known how to stand still. Except that today, the stillness was not the stillness of endurance. It was the stillness of arrival, the stillness of a person who has been in motion for a long time, and has reached the place they were going, and is allowed, finally, to simply be in it. She had not known it would feel like this. She thought, briefly, about the kitchen and the hearth, and the mending in the firelight, and the sound of laughter through the ceiling, and she let herself feel the weight of those 4 years for one more moment, not because she wanted to carry them forward, but because they had made her exactly precise enough, exactly clear-eyed enough, exactly ready enough, to stand in this garden on this morning, and know what it meant. Then she set the weight down. She looked at the crane in her hair, reflected briefly in the window glass of the estate wall behind William. Long life, fidelity, the capacity to endure. And underneath those 3 things, which her mother had chosen, and her grandmother had carved, and she had carried in her pocket for years, and finally put in her hair, where it was always supposed to go, the capacity to arrive. The officiant reached the part that required her to speak. She spoke. Her voice was steady, and clear, and entirely her own.